Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the regular Board of County Commissioners meeting, and with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order. And just ask that you take a moment of silence. Commissioner Lober?
Y'all would join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Lober.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to minutes for approval. I have a motion by Commissioner Pritchett, second by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to resolution awards and presentations. Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is Cameron Rutch here? Eagle Scout Cameron Rutch. He's outside.
We can come right back to it if you'd like.
That would be fine if Madam Chair, if you'd
He's
like to go
coming,
ahead. Oh,
I
yes?
think. I thought they gestured that he was coming. Here he is.
Well, that looks like an Eagle Scout, huh?
Couple clues.
Come on down, Cameron.
We're so proud to have you here tonight and give you this resolution. I'm going to read this, and then if you'd like to say something, we would love to hear from you. Whereas Cameron Rutch has achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, the highest rank awarded to Boy Scouts, by completing the demanding requirements of personal development, leadership, and community service. And whereas Cameron has worked hard towards his Eagle Scout Award by obtaining the 13 required Eagle badges, an additional 13 merit badges, and earning a bronze palm. You're going to have to tell us what that is. And whereas only 5% of Boy Scouts earn the Eagle Scout Award, a performance-based achievement with standards that have been well maintained over the years. And whereas Cameron graduated from Titusville High School, I did too, in 2019 with honors, was a leader in the Terrier Sound Band and Orchestra for 4 years, was a member of the All-County Band and was selected for Tri-State Honor Band at Florida State University in the Festival of Winds at the University of South Florida. Cameron is currently attending Eastern Florida State College, has a 4.0 GPA, and is a member of the President's Honor Roll. And whereas for his project, Cameron developed and planned and led a project to benefit community and First Christian Church. His work involved designing, planning, constructing, landscaping an ADA walkway, connecting various outdoors areas so that community members with disabilities can enjoy outdoor events. Whereas the lessons learned by obtaining the Eagle Scout Award are important not only to the life of a scout, but also to enhance the future development and leadership of our nation. Now therefore be it resolved that the Brevard County Board of County Commissioners does hereby recognize and congratulate Cameron Scott Rutch for his outstanding efforts in obtaining his Eagle Scout Award and offers congratulations and best wishes for your successful future. Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
Motion by
kinda different
Commissioner
for this one.
Pritchett, second
Okay.
by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I have to ask, which instrument did you play when you were in band?
I played the French horn.
I know how much time and effort goes into band, not just for you, but for Mom, and maybe Dad too, but I know how much hard work that is, and congratulations on that as well, because I know how much time and effort goes into that.
Thank you.
Cameron, I just noticed I really know your mom, and now I know who you are. So it's wonderful. We're kind of related in a way. And you know Jacob Johnson?
Yes. it's my
Grandma?
friend.
Okay, sir, go ahead. Would you like to say a few things?
Just thank you guys, and I just gotta thank my troop and my family, and yeah, thank you
Thank you.
guys.
I've got to ask you, what's the little Saturn patch that's blue on the center, roughly, on your right? It's a picture, it looks like Saturn with the ring around it.
It's on the band.
Right on the right side of your chest. Down a little? and to the right. One more. One more. There it is.
Oh, here?
Yeah, what's that?
That's some astronomy merit badge.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Camille? You want to come up to the podium?
Stop right here. It's right in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to read the resolution, and then after I finish, then you can tell us a little bit about what you want to say.
Okay.
Okay. Whereas, the white cane demonstrates and symbolizes the ability of every blind person to become self-reliant and achieve a full independent life and the capacity to work productively in competitive employment. And whereas every blind citizen in our state has the right to carry a white cane, which allows them to move freely and safely from place to place. Whereas every citizen should be aware that the law requires that motorists exercise appropriate caution when approaching a blind person carrying a white cane. And whereas Florida law calls upon all public and private employers to be aware of and utilize the employment skills of our blind citizens by recognizing their worth as individuals and their productive capacities. And whereas the state of Florida, through its public agencies and with the cooperative assistance of the National Federation of the Blind, can look forward to continued expansion of employment opportunities for and greater acceptance of blind persons in the competitive labor market. And whereas the determination of blind people to be independent and enjoy boundless freedom is enhanced with the growing use of the white cane. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida does hereby proclaim October 15th, 2019 as White Cane Safety Day. Done, ordered, and adopted in regular session this 8th day of October, 2019. Madam Chair, I move to approve this resolution.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. You want to say something, Camille?
Yes.
Okay,
Make sure I got the microphone.
it's right in front of you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Smith and members of the Board of County Commissioners. We can never stress how important our white canes are to us. It is our most ubiquitous symbol of both freedom and independence. And it's a reminder to all of those who operate motor vehicles that we are also pedestrians that are walking the sidewalks and crossing the streets. And we hope that each year when we have these White Cane Day proclamations and our annual events, that it brings home to all of those who do drive the streets of Brevard County that we follow the rules of the road, and so should you. Our lack of eyesight does not excuse a driver's lack of insight. And many times we have heard, well, blind people shouldn't walk the streets. Well, then you start saying that, the next thing you're going to say is, well, blind people shouldn't work. Blind people should be living in institutions and have people take care of them. So we celebrate this every single year. In fact, October is Meet the Blind Month with the National Federation of the Blind. And our chapter, the Melbourne Space Coast chapter, is having a car and bike show. It's our 5th annual one at the Fountains of Melbourne on Stack Boulevard on Saturday the 12th from 9 to 2. We're going to have classic and muscle cars, antiques, motorcycles. We'll have barbecue and cupcakes as well so people can eat and drink. And everyone is invited. It is free for the public. And if you wish to display your cars, it's $15. So we thank you again for recognizing the importance of our white canes, and we hope to have a wonderful relationship with all members of our community in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camille. And thank you for all you do for the Federation for the Blind. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Camille, would you give us an idea of what your education and your employment is?
I am currently unemployed. I lost my vision to diabetic retinopathy in 2005, at which time I was working for Space Coast Credit Union. Now, at the ripe old age of 43, I am back in college and hoping to earn my bachelor's degree in the spring of 2021 and then move on to law school, which unfortunately there isn't one in Brevard County, so I'd have to actually end up leaving the county at that point. But I have actually had college experience. I've been to Florida State University. When I was in high school, I attended Cornell University in New York for a special summer program, and I've also been to Barry University.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Would Joe like to speak?
Joseph.
I just got a signal, a few words. I
A
wear
few?
hearing aids. I didn't hear what you said. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a very lucky guy. This past week, I had a birthday.
Yay.
I am now 85 years young.
Wonderful.
Good afternoon, professionally. Tribute to the white cane. I've been losing my sight with retinitis pigmentosa and Usher syndrome with the hearing aids. I'm a deafblind. The car show we're going to have Saturday is a big deal. I'm very happy about it. I'm an antique car nut. I dreamed this thing up some years ago. And it's an opportunity for the blind community to mix with the sighted and the people that have passion for classics and antique automobiles. I have the little Red Express, so you come to our show and you see the Red Express.
We all want to thank you for accepting us. It has been 5 very interesting years. We appreciate everything that you have all done. Joe, as you know, is the founder, and because of our advancing years, we're trying to step back and get more people involved. And we thank you for your support over the past 5 years, and we anticipate that we'll be able to provide even more ability for people who are blind to live the life they want to live. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you both, and happy birthday.
Yes.
You got it right, 85 years young.
Yes.
This
I'm
guy
half
still
his
does
age.
body work.
I'm half his age. I don't have half his energy.
Joyce is coming.
Yeah, we're going to line
Here.
you up for the
Thank you so much.
photo here.
I'm not going to be in the picture.
All right, I have Joe right here in front of me.
Okay,
Okay.
Joe, we need to
Tell
turn
them
you
how you
around.
want them
Yeah,
arranged.
turn me around.
Yeah, turn around this way. There you go.
I got shingles about a year ago.
Okay, turn around some more.
Do you like
Turn
the
around some
birthday?
more. There you go. More.
This way?
Joe, let me
Turn your
take
right a little
take
bit.
this cane away
There you go.
from you momentarily.
You don't want the white cane?
No, I took his one.
Oh,
Okay. I think we're good.
You ready?
Keep your head up, Joe.
Am I looking in the right direction? Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't clap. All right, now it's my pleasure to do a resolution for Real Men Wear Pink. So all the guys out there that are in pink and here representing Real, come on down. Looks like a pink convention.
That pink bow tie.
Yeah, I like it.
We good? All right. Whereas the National Real Men Wear Pink Day is second Wednesday of October each year, and whereas Real Men Wear Pink Day is a chance to raise awareness of our mission to save more lives from breast cancer, and whereas Real Men Wear Pink gives men a leadership role in the fight against breast cancer. Community leaders around the nation use the power of pink to raise awareness and money for the American Cancer Society's breast cancer initiatives, including innovative research, patient services, and education around screenings and risk reduction. It's one important way we're attacking cancer from every angle. And whereas on this day, we're asking people to show their support for the cause of wearing pink and supporting Real Men Wear Pink. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida does hereby proclaim October 9th, 2019, Real Men Wear Pink Day, done, ordered, and adopted in regular session this 8th day of October, 2019 AD. Madam Chair, I move to approve this resolution.
Motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Lober. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, guys, for being here. Michelle, you want to say a word about Real Men?
Real Men Wear Pink. It's a campaign that involves all these wonderful guys and plus some who weren't able to be here, and I'm just grateful to them and you for taking on the challenge of raising money for the American Cancer Society and for being here tonight. And it's actually this year it's going to be on the 10th because Wednesday the 9th is a Jewish holiday.
Oh,
Do you want to introduce some of these guys? So for the people that don't know who they are.
I don't. This is Tom's crew. I don't know.
Tom, you want to introduce your guys?
Sure. These guys my name is Tom Adam, District Chief with Brevard County. These guys are firefighters and lieutenants from Station 47 in Vieira by the zoo. We got over 600 people in our department, and about 70% of them have bought shirts in solidarity for this campaign. So thank you.
That's awesome. Thanks, Tom.
And so the next to Tom is Michael Ayers. He's from the Melbourne Chamber, and then Peter Menino's from Merrill Lynch. Brent Peoples is from Raymond James, that's what I thought. Todd Pokriva from the Vieira Company, and Joe Mayer, who works at Lockheed Martin.
Thanks. I want people to know who in the community is participating because sometimes, we all know who these guys are, but
But other people don't. And
Yeah.
then other people, got Kenny Johnson, who is City Council for Palm Bay. John Frazier, who's an attorney at Weiderman Malik. And then, Mark Mullen, superintendent, is involved, and he involves all the students, so it's pretty awesome. And I'm trying to think.
And I should remember because I
Like,
asked.
who else am I missing? I don't know if I'm missing.
I can't remember anybody else.
Oh, from USSSA.
Oh,
Don.
yeah, Donnie D. Donatus, USSSA,
and then
Yes.
Commissioner Smith.
and Commissioner Smith. And for the picture, I'd like all our staff that have worn pink today to come on down, and we'll get a picture of everybody.
Get a picture of Ian's pink blazer.
This is going to be,
Thank you. Todd forgot his sister. I was going to say that to you at the meeting, but.
Okay, how we looking? We need some more people on that side?
Yeah, probably some more people on that side.
You guys. How we doing now?
We're looking good. If you were going to squeeze in a little bit, you're a little bit outside. All right, looking good. Ready?
Thank all of you for being here.
You're so pretty.
Thank you guys so much. Okay, Commissioner Lober?
I was 2 minutes off. I told you I thought it would be 5:20. I apologize. It's the best estimate I could give you. So I've got some folks here from Rotary, from the different Rotary clubs that are local to us here. We've got a resolution that I'm going to read, and we do have it framed, but if anyone's wondering, just in advance so folks don't think I'm getting too attached to the resolution, they're having an event later on, so we're going to hold on to the resolution even though it's framed and then have it presented later. So it reads as follows. Whereas Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who unite and take action to create lasting change in communities across the globe. And whereas the Rotary motto, service above self, inspires members to provide humanitarian service, follow high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus and in 1988 helped establish the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which today includes the World Health Organization, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to immunize the children of the world against polio. And whereas polio cases have dropped by, this is a correct number here, 99.9% since 1988, and the world stands on the threshold of eradicating the disease. And whereas to date, Rotary has contributed more than $1.9 billion with a B US dollars and countless volunteer hours to protecting more than $2.5 billion, again with a B, children in 122 countries. And whereas Rotary is working to raise an additional $50 million per year, which would be leveraged for maximum impact by an additional $100 million annually from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And whereas these efforts are providing much needed operational support, medical staff, laboratory equipment, and educational materials for healthcare workers and parents. And whereas in addition, Rotary has played a major role in decisions by donor governments to contribute more than $8 billion to the effort. And whereas Rotary members in several clubs throughout Brevard County sponsor service projects to address such critical issues as poverty, disease, hunger, illiteracy, and the environment in their local communities and abroad. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, does hereby this day proclaim October 24th, 2019 as World Polio Day and encourages all citizens to join Rotary International in the fight for a polio-free world. Done, ordered, and adopted, yada, yada. I move to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
So if you all could just introduce yourselves and maybe say a few words.
Dick Charpentier from the Cocoa Beach Rotary Club. This is Peggy Russell from the club here at Merritt Island, and Barbara H. from the Rotary Club in Cocoa Beach also. There's two in Rotary Clubs in Cocoa Beach, two in Merritt Island. And so the four of us are all sponsoring this and have asked Commissioner Lober to do this. And we want to thank on behalf of all of our clubs the fact that you've had this resolution and proclamation for us. As this has been declared the World Polio Day by the UN, and in effect, there are only two countries in the world in which polio is still a reality, and that the Rotary Club is primarily responsible for beginning this effort and has raised, as we've indicated, lots and lots of money. None of you are old enough to remember polio was a real problem, but when I grew up, polio was a problem, and we have people who are members of our group who had polio. We had a speaker about 6 months ago who came in who was 38 years old, and when he asked what Rotary did, we told him we eliminated polio, and he said, "What's polio?" So we've done such a fantastic job that he didn't know what polio was. But in effect, that's only one of the things we do, and I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for doing this. And by the way, I'm really impressed with what you do here. This is my first meeting, so I'm really impressed, and thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you. If you'd like to get a photo, we can do that, but again, I have to hold on to that resolution.
No,
I
that's
have my
fine.
ninja
We
grip on it.
understand, but we're glad you're coming. Thank you.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Sure.
Because I can remember polio, and I remember as a little kid in grade school. Was it a cube that we had to take to immunize us from?
Yes.
Yeah, see? Sugar cube.
I remember
yeah.
wearing a mustard patch. My mother discovered that if you wore a mustard patch, you didn't get polio. Have no idea where that came from.
Sounds like a wives' tale to me.
It was, but I wore it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're old. You're old.
I know it.
You're all invited to October 24th at the Merritt Island Lincoln dealership. We're having a function with hors d'oeuvres and drinks and so on, and we're going to be celebrating this great accomplishment that Rotary has had, plus other things. So the 24th. Thank you very much. 5 o'clock.
Thank you. All right, moving on to consent.
Move to approve.
Yeah, Commissioner, or I almost called you Commissioner Bate. So you're still starting with that. Commissioner for a day.
We'd like to pull F13 because we have 4 names and we have 3 at-large appointments for that particular item. So if we can pull it and talk at the end of the consent, that would be great.
I'll go ahead and modify my motion. Actually, you know what, I'll withdraw the prior motion, make a new motion to approve it, less the one item that's been identified, F13.
Okay, motion to approve consent with removal of F13 by Commissioner Lober. Second by Commissioner Pritchett. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, you want to talk about F13?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Under Florida statute for the Melbourne Tillman, you have 3 at-large appointments. They are 3-year appointments. We did receive, and you have in your package, 4 names from various commissioners that have put their, I would say, nominee, who they'd like to see appointed on there. So it's up to the board to discuss what 3 names that you would like us to move forward on and appoint to serve 3-year terms.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, ma'am. Well, I'm thinking you guys are the ones who sit on this board, so unless there's any other ideas, I probably would go with the recommendation from District 2, District 3, and District 5. No, wait, I'm sorry. I get y'all's districts messed up all the time. Kurt, Christine, and John's.
Commissioner Lober?
I was just, get my microphone to work here, there we go. Yeah, I was just going to say, I saw that there were a couple of spots that were open, didn't see a couple of folks nominated, so I put one in. Quite frankly, I'm happy to go any which way. The individual that I put on there, with that said, has been on there a while. I will tell you that I have spoken to at least one other individual who served on that board to ascertain really how the board works, who contributes, who doesn't contribute. I don't think anyone doesn't contribute. And I do think there might be something to be said for having someone on there with a little bit of institutional knowledge due to the fact that some of the folks do have a little bit of tenure there, but some do not. That said, this isn't a tremendously important issue to me. I would defer to the folks who this is a bit more local for in terms of their thoughts, but I'm happy to go with anything. This isn't one where I have a real strong interest in it one way or the other. I just thought that the nomination that I put through would be something that could help.
Thank you, Commissioner Lober. Any more input? Okay, I'll just say that my reappointment has been my appointment one other time, like for one other term. I think he served under Commissioner Infantini, but I appointed him when I was elected, and he asked that for a reappointment, so that's why I went with him. I heard he is a valuable member of the board, so I'd like him to stay on if possible. So, and that was Mr. Poshak, Drew Poshak. So can I get a motion if no one, oh, Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to give some background on my appointment. I looked at the appointees, and I thought, well, Mr. Lober, I think that Joe Hale's done a good job, but he's been there 17 years. And you being the leader of term limits for these volunteer positions, I just thought it would be appropriate that we don't reappoint Joe Hale. So I came up with John Waldering, and he's got a tremendous background in marine sciences, he's worked in a marina, he grew up on the Cincinnati River, and he's very attuned to water issues.
If you vetted him, I'm happy. I looked, I saw there was one more opening, and, you know, all things equal, I certainly agree it's better to have some fresh blood in there, but at the time that I put the appointment in there, all weren't equal because we had one more spot than we had in terms of folks that were interested in applying, so I have no problem with that. And if you want, I'll go ahead and make it a motion. I'll go ahead and move to appoint those that have been nominated, less my nomination.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Did you guys get that okay? Okay.
Sorry.
All right. If it's okay with the commission, and I asked Commissioner Tabaya, because he put this on the agenda, if we can move item D3, if we can move item J1 to the end of the consent agenda, because Ms. Rosanka has another meeting after this. She has one other thing on the agenda, but I figured this was the safest place, or the smartest place to place it, since it was right after consent, and she didn't know that this item was going to be on the agenda, so this was a little bit of a surprise to her, so that's why I asked if we could move it to this, and the commissioner that placed it on the agenda didn't have a problem with it. So, Commissioner Tabaya?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this came to my attention speaking with the county attorney's office as well as council. I've spoken with the Banana River Front. This simply would formally extend the deadline for completion of improvements for a short period of time and issue a temporary conditional occupancy permit. This hopefully will provide some finality and some clarity, and I'll like to put a motion so everyone knows where we are on this, and hopefully we can discuss it, or would you rather me wait for the motion till later, Madam Chair?
Whatever you want.
Okay. The motion is direct staff to restrict any additional extensions to 6 months pending no declared state or federal emergencies. During this period, the county will provide a temporary conditional occupancy permit and extension for the completion of improvements outlined under the settlement agreement. All improvements shall be completed to staff satisfaction per the applicable requirement. Should staff call a performance bond without further action from the board, should these actions not be met with a time period specified? That would be the motion, Madam Chair.
Okay, that motion by Commissioner Tabaya,
Second for discussion.
second by Commissioner Pritchett for discussion. Commissioner Lober?
Okay, this is kind of an odd one for me because I saw it was put on by D3, and I thought to myself when I first saw this, I think that's in my district. And interestingly, it is. I did speak with staff with respect to this to try to get a little background insofar as why it was on the agenda to their knowledge and really what, if any, issues had taken place. But rather than me essentially regurgitating it, I don't know if I could ask staff either, perhaps, I don't know if it's more appropriate to direct toward the county attorney's office, or Tad, if you want to handle it, or...
Sure. So if I understand the question, it's what's remaining to be done.
Right, essentially what makes this atypical, and if you want to give a little background on prior extensions, or if there were any agreements, things of that nature, maybe that would be...
Yes, absolutely. So the agreement was because the Squid Lips restaurant was a non-conforming structure. And so they came in to do an expansion, and the settlement agreement was part of that expansion. So the board agreed to certain terms in the agreement to allow them to move forward and build a deck and expand that non-conforming use. So in that agreement, there was provisions that would allow them to obtain a temporary CO. And then the temporary CO could be utilized while they did the improvements, like improve some parking, do some stormwater. And then those have been extended beyond. There was also a provision for a performance bond to be provided, which that has been done, and that has run its year's course. So we have utilized all of the extensions provided in the agreement. So now we are kind of at an area where we don't necessarily, in the agreement, it doesn't specifically say that we can have another extension, but it does say that it can be extended for certain reasons or for a good cause. So I think that if I understand Commissioner Tobias' item is he's wanting to ensure that we just have one more extension to get it completed.
To your understanding, is this the fourth extension or fifth extension, or what number are we at this point, roughly?
This would be the, hold on one second, I can tell you.
Sure, thank you.
This would be the fifth extension of the temporary CO.
And I don't know the answer to this, but in terms of extensions, how much, if any, administrative burden is involved in you're all processing an additional extension request? Is this something that's 5 minutes or 5 hours?
It's probably about a 30-minute to an hour-long process because we look at it through the building department. But there is coordination with other departments, so I can't speak to, like, Public Works is part of that. I couldn't speak to how much involvement they take or what it requires for them, because there's a certain, the concern is that we have all of the life safety aspects of the site and the building covered before we issue a temporary CO. And so I sometimes what we'll get is somebody will want to move in and occupy the building, and perhaps they don't have the landscaping complete. So they'll ask for a temporary CO knowing that they have the landscaping scheduled to be done. That's not necessarily the case here, but that's typically where we see it used.
Is it substantially, insofar as you're aware, is it substantially in compliance? I mean, do we have a lot that's left to be accomplished? Are there a few things? How long do you think it would realistically? I understand you're not an engineer or a contractor, I should say, but really, how long should they need from the point that they're at right now?
So my understanding is they have considerable amount of site work to do. There's some stormwater ponds that need to be constructed or reconstructed. There's some parking that needs to be looked at. I believe the building side of things have been completed, and so it's just a matter of the site work.
I appreciate it. I'd definitely like to hear if Ms. Rosenka put in a card at some point from her, but
She did.
She did, okay. Yeah, I don't know what way I'm going to go with this, but it's certainly an interesting one.
And I think this started before you were here, I'm sure. I mean, if I remember
It
right.
must have.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it was quite a lengthy discussion. I'll just say that. Ms. Rosenka? Oh, Commissioner Pritchett?
It's okay. Commissioner Lober, I know you just have a lot of time and looking for stuff to do.
Of course.
You might want to go back and revisit some of this. I will definitely defer to you with what you want to do with this, but I understand Commissioner Tobias' motion. There's been a lot of leniency here with a lot of problems. So I think something needs to change because I think you're just going to have to watch it and find out. And I hope everything comes together soon. But there has been a lot of grace and mercy put towards this project here, so.
Yeah, my inclination, if I was still on the fence at the end of this discussion, was to ask staff. I understand it's not their favorite thing to start jumping in on policy decisions, but they really have a good idea in terms of how inconvenient, if at all, some of these things would be in terms of the impact it would have on their workers. So I may still, at the end of this, either ask staff if they have a strong inclination one way or the other, or alternatively, we'll see where things go.
Ms. Rosenka?
Good evening, Chairwoman, Madam Chair, I should say, members of the County Commission. My name is Kim Rozenka. I'm with the law firm of Cantwell and Goldman in Cocoa Village, representing Banana Riverfront LLC. I was furiously taking down notes. I was unaware it was on. I had talked to Commissioner Tobias. I just was surprised it was on tonight's. This motion, and I'm reading it on my cell phone, I understand the reason before it, but unfortunately, this, as written, actually amends the settlement agreement without the consent of my client, Banana Riverfront LLC. The agreement, which you don't have in front of you and I don't have in front of me, I'm doing from memory, allows for extensions of the temporary CO and times for performance for good cause shown. In the past, we've submitted emails saying this is why we need additional time. Staff has granted those. So the agreement said you could have 2 temporary COs and you could get extensions for good cause shown. So there has been issues. There's been discrepancies between what the engineer believes and what staff believes, what the surveyor believes. So they are working through it. It has taken longer than I think any of us anticipated, but it's a very low site. It's a very difficult site. I came before you at one time for impact fee credits because he had to remove a building. There's a retention pond issue that's outstanding still. The engineer says all the retention is complied with. Staff says they need to look at it. There's also a parking issue because it was a little ambiguous. What happens if you can't do A or B? There was no C option. So they're now working through option C without it being stated in the settlement agreement. So the agreement does provide for extension of all deadlines for good cause shown. It submitted a request for the temporary CO before the extension of the last one. The request included the good cause reasons, and as I've stated, it's the parking issue and the retention issue, and I haven't seen the latest comments that came out on Friday. But also, too, the problem with us only allowing one more extension, as I said, I believe it amends the settlement agreement without consent. We don't know what might happen. This does say something about disasters, natural disasters, but I'm not sure what that means. Is it like Irma? Is it Matthew? Or is it, what happened in the Bahamas? So it's unclear with that. But also, too, my client can't control what staff does, and staff has been responsive. I'm not saying they haven't, but there are times, especially with the site, because it's such an old site, and they're working with an old site, trying to retrofit and remove 100% of the nutrients going in from the Indian River on the new improvement. So it is something novel and unique, and took some design issues. So we have requested an extension for 6 months. We have provided a whole nother performance bond for a whole nother year through October of 2020. So the request to you is for an extension of 6 months and of the temporary CO and of time for performance. If that doesn't happen and we don't ask for a request, pull the bond. I don't have any problem with staff pulling the bond at that point. If we can't get it done in 6 months, we'll come back for you. I'll have the engineer here this time, and he'll tell you what the good cause is. So I would ask for the 6 month extension, just not limit it to 1, because that changes the settlement agreement.
Boy, you timed that perfectly.
I didn't time it at all. I had more, but I'm getting good at 3 minutes.
But you might be able to speak more if someone asks you something. Commissioner Lober?
If we could defer to Commissioner Tobias first. I see his lights on. I'm actually interested to hear what he has to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my intent certainly was not to step on your toes. This certainly began before you, and in all honesty, it began before me. But with the Chair's indulgence, I do have a couple quick questions for Council.
Okay.
And this may benefit Commissioner Lober here. Help catch us up on this. We got some of it, but I think this began before was the agreement. So this all began in 2017 when your client constructed a platform on the river without a permit. Is that correct?
Correct.
And without this permit, your client was illegally polluting the river with such items as stormwater. Is that correct?
That is not correct. He had done an underwater storm system engineered. It just wasn't permitted, so he was not polluting.
Let me ask, would Tad, without a permit, whether any type of design work was done, the fact that the county did not see it, did not sign off on it, would that be liable for any type of penalty that you're aware of?
There was no permit issued for the construction. It was an after-the-fact permit.
So would that client, would that individual that built a structure, whether they had any type of material prior, would they be liable for any type of penalty for potentially polluting the lagoon?
Could you restate that question, please?
Yes, sir.
Had you checked off on the, let me put it this way, had you checked off, and I think the answer is no to this, had you checked off on the work that Squid Lips had done absent of that permit? Were you aware of the engineering that went into that?
Not at the time of construction, no.
Thank you. So the board then cured this illegal behavior with conditions such as stormwater treatment and noise restriction, is that correct?
Correct.
Is it accurate to say that during this time period, the business also became delinquent in their taxes?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't see the relevance of it either.
The relevance, I think, goes to what Commissioner Pritchett said, that quite often we always blame staff, and staff has bent over.
I wasn't blaming staff. I'm just saying they have been working with them.
I'm not saying you're blaming staff,
yeah.
but the default is it's staff's fault. And if you saw the amount, Commissioner Lober, and if you saw the amount of paperwork that was, there is more paperwork that has gone into this than wood that went into the legal structure that was built on the back of this building. To go on, your client voluntarily entered a settlement agreement with the county, is that fair?
Right.
But they have failed to meet the deadlines which they voluntarily agreed to. Once, twice, three, four times. This will be the fifth. Is that correct?
No, the temporary COs were provided for in the agreement. The time for performance included those temporary CO issuances.
I'll go back.
We have not failed to meet the time for performance that many times.
This is the fourth.
I'm doing this off my memory.
This is the fourth or not fifth time that we're extending it. Is that? I think that's been stated
There's two different
twice.
extensions. There's a temporary CO extension and there's a time for performance. They're two different things based upon two different site plans.
I'm aware. I'm also aware that your client was in the rears in taxes on this one.
Lots of people are in arrears in taxes. That doesn't have anything to do with the agreement. It wasn't part of the agreement.
I understand, but the point goes back to Commissioner Pritchett over here that we've bent over backwards for your client. I think this was even further. And Madam Chair, I would, and I talked to staff about this. I think our other, I'm going to ask Ms. Bentley on this. I'm sorry I wasn't prepared for this either. I thought this was very generous. I guess it was not. First of all, I'd like to pull my motion and ask what alternatives do we have? Do we have an alternative based on the settlement agreement to pull the performance bond on this?
Yes.
So I'd like to pull my motion, Madam Chair, and seeing as Ms. Rosanka is not happy with 6 months because it could go another time, I'd like to ask that we direct staff to pull the performance bond based on the settlement agreement.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tobias to pull the performance bond. Do I have a second? Commissioner Lober?
Yeah, I can just tell you, I don't know that I'm in a position where I'm at all ready to start pulling a performance bond tonight. Down the road, that may be something I'm happy with or at least content with. But, given what was put on the agenda for tonight, that's a little extreme at this juncture. Not to say that it won't be even in 2 weeks if things change. I said before with respect to your initial motion that if I was ambivalent, and I still am, that I'd be inclined to defer to staff. I don't know that I want to put Tad in that position, so I'll put Mr. Abate in that position instead to see if he has a strong impression in terms of whether there's one route that we can take versus another that'll make things a little bit easier for staff and hopefully reduce the burden that they have in the future.
Well, if the board, and I understand you'd rather not do it, I do believe what staff was trying to work with Banana Riverfront, and that's why they looked to get an additional performance bond, which would allow the additional 6 months to occur. The other option would have been, at the end of the last one that was approved, that if it wasn't done to the county's satisfaction, we believe they had not met the terms, that by pulling that performance bond, which is what was just requested, the performance bond, the company would have the ability to remedy the situation and that's the action that we were seeking to do. It did not happen because we were looking at this additional 6-month opportunity as one more chance. Commissioner Tobias' action was really to say that, hey, from the board's perspective, if you did this, that we've given you as many. So when this last opportunity occurs, don't come back, because they will have the right to do what they could have done if, in fact, we at this time, the board, and more importantly, the staff, did not enter into this agreement with them and seek, I shouldn't say enter into this agreement, didn't work with them to get the performance bond extended for this additional 6-month period. I think that's a fair assessment.
So let me ask you, I'm sorry to try to pin you down on something. If you were sitting in this seat and you had a strong impression, the reason I ask is because this is something that's been going on apparently far longer than I've been around the block.
I would
you've
tell
been here
you
a little
that
while.
internally speaking with staff and with the county attorney's office, we all thought that this was a fair and appropriate way to move forward if the board saw that
Restriction
as
of the
something-
extensions?
as
Or-
this being the last extension, and that the board, that the staff at the end of this period would be able to, if the board approved this motion, to call the performance bond if in fact we did not have the substantial compliance at the end of this additional 6-month period.
Is there anything magical about 6 months? Could we make it 8 months or 10 months?
I think the performance agreement was actually up to October, so you have up to that period of time.
I would,
Madam Chair, may I?
sure.
The temporary COs are for a 6-month period, so that's why the 6 month is in there.
And I would just, to pipe in here, I would suggest, because this was a very complex issue and obviously an emotional one, I would suggest you sit with Ms. Rosanka, maybe the client, since this is your district, and talk to them and find out if you're comfortable actually giving them that extension, and sit with staff, because obviously you feel a little blindsided because you don't know what happened in the beginning, and it was pretty arduous. It was a tough experience I think for all of us. But at the same time, I mean, can you come up for a second? And usually I don't cut in when everybody's got their lights on, but I don't want there to be any misunderstanding, and I don't want Commissioner Lober to be tempted to, without having all of the information. And you can provide some of that now, but I think because this is a complex issue, maybe if you sat with him, maybe he comes back and says, this is insanity. But I know that, as far as the building that deck without a permit, didn't he just replace a deck that was there? I mean, wasn't that sort of how it started, and then he made it too big?
It was infill. There were trees, they took out trees and he put in infill decking. And yes, he did it without a permit.
Yes.
And then we tried to do rezoning so he could get a permit because it was non-conforming.
Right.
And then instead of filing lawsuits, we did the Burt Harris Mediation Act, got a resolution, and have been working on it. And I can't excuse what's not happened. I don't know enough about what's not happened or what has happened. I just firmly believe that if you limit it to one more 6 months, you're changing the settlement agreement that clearly provides for unlimited extensions with good cause shown. Perhaps you don't think we've shown good cause, then I think you have the right not to grant extensions.
I mean, from what you know, I mean, I guess he's your client, but unless you're out there, is he making forward movement?
He is, but there, again, and I think staff has been wonderful on this. Please don't get me wrong. Everyone from Tad to Mike to Rebecca to John to everyone who's been involved, Rachel. The issue is it's a hard site to put retention in because it's so low. He had to remove a building to put retention. Where he's going to put the retention, there were utilities. So they made the other retention pond larger. Staff wants to make sure, rightfully so, that it's holding the water it's supposed to and reducing the nutrients it's supposed to. That I just learned Friday and Monday. So that's about I know. And then I know about the parking issue because it had millings. Then they said they could put shell, but they didn't like the shell. So now what do? It's now part of it's a dirt parking lot. Staff is trying to make sure that it's retaining its water as it should and not dumping into other retention. That's as much as I know about what has to be done. Should be easy, but I'm not an engineer either, and it's difficult with that low site. That was part of the problem. They didn't think they could put the retention on site. They were looking at off-site county property to put retention. So it's been a very long process. And yes, staff has worked with them, and
And because I'm sure many of us up here have formed opinions, and then maybe those opinions would be changed on new information given. I guess staff at some point spoke with Commissioner Tobias. I don't know who initiated what, but obviously Commissioner Tobias wants to move forward on this. But I think it would only be fair and right for Commissioner Lober, at least it would be my suggestion, that he sit down with your client at the very least, because you at this point haven't talked to your client today, I'm sure.
Not about this wording. Now,
Right.
Commissioner Tobias had sent me similar wording that I had spoken to my client, and he said, I am concerned because of the design constraints and because of the back and forth with staff and our engineer, that there may be some circumstances that can't be done in 6 months. I don't know what they would be.
And it may be that this board decides ultimately to impose that 6 months, but I think in order for Mr. Lober to make an educated decision, he probably needs all the information.
And I
At
had
least in my
every
opinion.
intention to call Mr. Lober before this got back to the agenda, but I didn't realize it was going to be on tonight's agenda.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Smith?
I'll pass, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I forgot to ask Ms. Rosenka, who is your engineer?
Bruce Moya. It's not my engineer, it's the client.
Sorry, can you say it a little bit louder? I'm sorry.
Bruce Moya, MBV, is the client's engineer.
Okay. There may be part of the issue there, but guys, I thought the 6-month extension for the 5th time was very fair. I spoke with staff about it, and I think staff was a little uncomfortable for allowing the pulling the performance bond, and that's why I'd spoken about this, because I'd met with staff when I first got elected about this issue. So I'd mentioned it as something that was coming back, and I had it on a board to ask where we were in this whole process. And that's the genesis of me putting it on the agenda. I don't know what the middle ground is. I certainly thought the extension of 6 months was a very generous middle ground. Clearly, Ms. Rosenka's client did not. So I thought this was binary, but clearly 6 months isn't enough. 6 months plus a declaration of a national or a statewide emergency is enough. I'm guessing nothing is going to be enough when it comes to this. So I'll certainly wait to hear what other suggestions folks have on this one. But I think it's unfair to put staff in a position to have to make the determination on something that we probably should be doing up here.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you. I don't know how much relevance the beginning history of this would have to the situation we're in now, but right after I got elected, pretty quickly after that is when we had to deal with the Squid Lips situation. And there was a lot of information, and from what I remember, it's not just so much he expanded a deck, he built an outside restaurant. It wasn't ADA compliant, there was no parking, the neighbors were having a fit. The stormwater wasn't there, and when I talked to him, he kind of said, well, I thought I could get permission, forgiveness instead of permission. So it was a big deal getting through it. Actually, me and Barfield were the ones who voted against him getting to move forward, but it won 3-2 on it, just because I struggle with that you had something non-ADA compliant, but that's all in the past with this. But I almost can't believe we're still doing this 2 years later. So this seems to be a personality of this situation. So my question is, when we're looking at this, do we have any safety issues right now? That would be a question. And then if we're just violating our own principles by extending this and extending this, I mean, if we're really causing harm to the lagoon right now by not fixing this, I kind of agree with Commissioner Tobias. I think we need to figure out, I think it's our duty to make sure that things don't just stay prolonged if it's causing harm. So that would be my question right now, with all the things aside from the beginning. But the history through this is I'm just still amazed that we're still dealing with situations from Banana Riverfront. So I just want to throw that out to you, Commissioner Lober. I think it might be worthy of going back to that meeting, and I think it was a 2-hour time period, and just kind of listening to all of the information we were given at that time.
That's going to be my Saturday.
Okay.
Commissioner Tobias?
Oh.
Oh, Commissioner Lober?
I was going to say,
Oh, you were on
picking
there
on me here.
twice, sorry.
No, I'll just say, Ms. Rosenka, what I'd like to do is sometime between now and as soon as possible, essentially, set up a meeting with you, with your client, with Mr. Moya, and then I'll volunteer Ms. Bentley as well, and myself, so that we can try to figure out what's reasonable. I will tell you that at least at first blush this evening, saying that a 6-month extension may be in breach or not in compliance with the agreement that was struck out earlier. If that's the case and our alternative is to pull the performance bond, I don't know that that's any better for your client. So it's one of those things where I think there needs to be a little flexibility in terms of how we deal with this. I'm not necessarily opposed to a 6-month limitation. I'm not necessarily opposed to a 12-month limitation, but I would like to sit down with you, and we need to figure out something where really the burden in terms of getting some additional extension is something beyond merely impracticability. So impossibility would be what I'd be looking for at that point. Not, well, it was horribly inconvenient, we'd have to have paid 10 times as much. There's got to be an end in sight, whether that end is 6 months or a year. If it's really imperative to tie it into a CO, we can take a look at that. If it's not, maybe there's some middle ground between 6 months and a year. I don't know. But I would ask, if you don't mind, if you want to reach out and kind of coordinate this, that would be helpful. Maybe reach out to my office to set up a time with me, with Ms. Bentley, yourself, Mr. Moya, and your client. If Mr. Bate wants to attend, I have no problem with that. If Tad wants to attend, I have no problem with that as well. But I think those folks that I identified are really crucial for it. And then if we could set this perhaps for a zoning meeting, do we have one coming up in then maybe 3 weeks time frame, something like that?
Or October 22nd.
Yeah, we could, if that's okay with everyone, I'd move to continue it to October 22nd. And then, barring an absolute impossibility for us to sit down, I would expect that we at least will know where we are and where the flexibility lies, if there is any. And maybe, just maybe, we can put this on the consent agenda and have this resolved without too much heartache. So that's my motion.
Commissioner Tobias? Well, we have another motion on the floor first. Your light's on again.
Okay.
I don't know if you meant to hit it again. I was just telling you.
I was going to second that motion, but I was hoping we could add barring.
Are you going to pull your other
Yes,
motion?
I'd pull
Okay.
it, but I'd ask for Ms. Rosenka's sake that we add in that barring a natural disaster or a statewide declaration of a hurricane or some other ridiculous situation, that it be on the 22nd.
I'm fine with the 22nd, but in terms of my limitation for performance, just to kind of reiterate, I'm thinking that, there are two different standards. There's impracticability and then there's impossibility. So if we're going to set a hard and fast deadline, maybe we can explicitly have them waive impracticability, so that the only exception would be if there's physical impossibility for them to perform. But we can sort it out. We can sit down and sort it out.
And quite honestly, Commissioner Lober, you may meet with them and you may not be satisfied at all, and you may be in a place where you want to pull the performance bond. Who knows?
It's possible.
But you should be a part of that, at least as far as what you want and expect of your district, only because you need all the information so you can make an education.
I thought I had a pretty good amount of it coming in, but there's a lot of backstory that I was simply
Because
unfamiliar
I
with.
hope there's a good reason for this being so long, other than, time back and forth, because I'd like to see it done too, because it was so awful for this commission to have to deal with. I mean, just complicated, I guess, for us to deal with. All right, so I have, John, you pulled your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you guys good with my motion over there on the clerk's side?
Are we following the rules, Eden? We don't have to because it was seconded, he could just pull it still?
Well, he withdrew it, I think.
Okay, all right.
So I think they'd like me to restate the motion, if that's all right.
Please.
So essentially, I'm going to move to continue this to the 22nd.
I have a motion by Commissioner Lober to continue this item to the October 22nd meeting.
Correct.
Second.
A second? Second by Commissioner Pritchett? Or,
Take a pick.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Please. And maybe we should also set that up for Vieira, just to make it a little easier for staff. Thanks.
All right. Public comments. I have 2 cards. Mr. Tovey?
Charles Tovey, 2555 Roberts Road, Melbourne. I almost wore my pink shirt today, and I'll wear it next time if I'm able. Wrote on my card about the derelict boats that they can't get rid of, and just do like they did to me. Take their boat inadvertently, give them a fine, make them pay the fine, put a lien against their house, put a big hole in it, tell them to buy a trailer and put the boat on the trailer, and then sanction them because it's 8 inches away from the full pull. I almost lost my finger, but thanks. And a lien against my house. So all these derelict vessels or any boat, because they don't like it or it's an eyesore, people just take it and do what you did to me. And everybody agrees that that was okay, right? And it was legal. So I got that's one of the liens. The other one's for the arson of the house. But I'll go on to finish my budget statement, and that was from last week, and I thought I was going to get 5 minutes. But the other half of Sheriff Ivey's organization, as well as the other county and state, and they get benefits, and there's other people that fund them, and I think they should list, like the EDC, a list of all their payments and things, and how many new cruisers were totaled. And are we doing this on purpose? You never know. Out in California, they caught and no disregard to the fire department or anybody else of service to our nation and our country and the people, but they caught a fireman lighting fires out in California. You know, and I've found things that are deliberate problems with our lagoon, man-made. I couldn't have done it, and there's no way, and somebody has to know, and that's why I didn't tell all my information about my route, because as soon as I do something, they come and destroy it. But the low crime rate, isn't that a reflection of our great president and our great governor providing jobs so people don't have to go out and commit these crimes? And isn't it a reflection on the people that teaching these people what's right and what's wrong and giving them alternative to crime? That's not it. And I have a whole bunch of things, and I can't get into other, oh yeah, before I forget, and it's been on the top of my list, I came to my property and found my dead dog, my 2 dead turtles, and the 5 dead cats, all at the same time. I'd only been gone a couple hours, as well as the burnt house and the cars and the boat and all the other stuff. And nobody has any consideration or no. I gotta go, bye.
Commissioner Lober?
Just real briefly, I did want to touch on the derelict vessel issue. I can tell you that both Natural Resources and BCSO has been prioritizing that real well. In particular, Matt Culver in Natural Resources, and then Deputy Keck, Byron Keck over in East Precinct, which is on the other side of the building where my office is. The problem with simply going and snatching boats, as enticing as that may be, is that there's a due process requirement, and it's partially dependent in terms of how it actually works through on whether it's BCSO or state authorities that originally find that boat and tag it. One of the issues they've had is if they're unable to locate the individual, there's a process they have to go through in order to get to a point where they're even potentially able to do something. They've had on at least one occasion that I'm familiar with an individual who is incarcerated, who's entitled to a hearing in Florida, but he's not in a position where they're going to take him for a hearing or where he's even able to be transported. So there are a lot of issues that come into play with respect to that. If we have local individuals, oftentimes it's easier, but it's simply not the case that everyone's able to be served properly and that they're either willing to waive a hearing or they go and participate in the hearing in a timely fashion. So there's really a lot that goes into it. I think that BCSO and Natural Resources really is doing everything that they possibly can to try to get them taken out. And I think the fact that we've been seeing less and less and less of them over a span of time is indicative of the fact that they are doing a good job. Obviously, anytime we get any sort of inclement weather that's substantial, whether it's a hurricane or otherwise, that number will probably creep up again. But I think if the overall trend is that we're having fewer and fewer, there's something right being done.
Thank you. Gary Helton?
Good evening.
My name is Gary Helton. I'm at 11426 South Tropical Trail. Madam Chairperson and Commissioners and staff, I'd first just like to say we appreciate that y'all put up the funds and repaved our 2-mile stretch of South Tropical Trail. It was certainly in need of it, lots of potholes, and it was in pretty bad shape. But as part of the process, I'm sure you're all aware, the speed bumps were eradicated in order to pave the road. And then after the paving was complete, they were not reinstalled. Several calls from a number of residents on the trail got the answer that we were waiting for a 30-day cure period for the asphalt in order to reinstall the speed bumps, or humps, as we refer to them now. But month and a couple months went by, and we started asking what's going on, and then it turns that maybe they're not going to be reinstalled, or they're going to be installed at some point, but it's a new design, and we can't reinstall the old bumps that we used to have, and now it's got to be a hump under some new ITE guidelines. And more time passes, and then one day in the mail we get a response form from the traffic engineer asking if we vote for bumps or for humps or not for humps. It created a massive amount of confusion in the neighborhood. One, we had an old bump that was short and tall, and now we're proposing speed humps, but we were not provided any kind of explanation of what a hump is and how it differs from a bump. So the handful of residents that were opposed to reinstalling anything, which is what this vote asked, were thinking back to the old bumps that were 5-6 inches tall, that motorcycles and low-profile sports vehicles had to almost stop to go over. And when they go over them, then on the other side they accelerate, and a lot of that's in the middle of the night or late in the evening, and it's pretty disruptive to residents, and it's disruptive to the flow of traffic. Instead of a constant 25 miles an hour, they slow down, go across, take off, speed up before the next one, slow down again. So fortunately, the traffic engineer had adopted the new ITE guidelines for humps. Cynthia Morris passed that on to me. I distributed it to the neighbors, trying to explain, we don't know what we're voting for, but the vote was supposedly going to be the final decision as to what goes on. Through the process, we get a hold of the policy on bumps and humps and administrative order, and we realized that the whole process of removing them really hasn't been followed as far as we understand the policy. So I'm here to ask you, it's been 5 months, it's a dangerous road. Something needs to be done sooner than later. If you can't do it by reinstalling humps because we haven't continued
Okay, I
due
hate to cut
process.
you off, but I have to.
Just one last thing,
I
some
can't-
temporary measures.
Only because
Okay.
then the next guy wants 30 seconds, and then you had 20, and
Understand.
it just gets muddy. But
you
Commissioner
for your
Lober is
time.
going to speak on it, obviously.
Sure, and I appreciate you coming out today. What I'll tell you, in terms of a particular location, oftentimes there's some extenuating circumstances, but my understanding and the way that it's worked in practice is if we have folks in an area where there were not existing humps, and that may change the dynamic a little bit, the reason they send that out is to determine that you have a sufficiently high percentage of folks that want them. I can't recall off the top of my head if it's 80 or 90%. Do you all remember?
85.
85. Well, there you go. Split the difference. 85%. I knew it was something right in that range, but 85% that want them, because if there's a substantial percentage that don't, there's no reason for the county to spend the resources to put something in that's simply not wanted by the residents that live nearby. That said, I know that another consideration that might have come into play, and I'm speculating with respect to this, is over a period of time the trip count changes. And I don't know if it's a situation where you were approaching a different level of trips simply because you have that much more traffic, which would bode against putting in speed humps. For instance, that's why you don't see them on Wickham Road. I know that there have been requests to put them on very high traffic roads like Wickham, and I appreciate people's concern, but the problem is when you have over a certain number of vehicles traveling over that road per unit time, it just doesn't fit within the policies and the guidelines that we have. I will tell you that with respect to my office, When I got in, we had a number of speed hump applications that simply hadn't had action taken on them. We did at the outset, based on the fact that some had been sitting there for a very long time, try to get to those and determine whether to deny them or whether to approve them. But what I will tell you is I've never approved one that hasn't hit that threshold where staff at least says it's in the gray area where it would qualify for being approved. I've had folks that are upset about that. But if we have a substantial percentage of folks that don't want them, I just can't justify putting them in. And I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong standing here saying that folks may not have understood the difference between a hump and a bump versus a speed table versus any of the other terminology that may exist here or elsewhere in the country. But we only have our standardized way of polling folks and determining if they want it. What I would tell you is, if you want to discuss this a little further, rather than doing it with a five-person commission, I'm happy to sit down with you. I think what would be helpful is to have Karina Gum, who's on staff as well, sit down so that we can go over exactly what happened. Because the part that kind of is out of my usual wheelhouse is that they were there previously and they were taken out to repave or to repair the road. So that does mix things up, and there may be some peculiarities with respect to that I haven't had a chance to come across up to this point. So please reach out to my office, and I'll set up a meeting for us to sit down with Karina, probably in Vieira, just to make it easier for her, so we can figure out what options are available.
What is where are you talking about? Which section? Because
2-mile stretch from Mathers Bridge to 2 miles north of the bridge.
I think that's Commissioner
It's
Smith.
the newly paved area.
Yeah.
Oh, if it's that far south, I stand corrected.
Yeah, I think
It's in
Commissioner
District
Smith.
4.
Yeah. Do you have any
Scratch that.
insight, or do you want to comment on it, Commissioner Smith, or did you want to meet, or what's your take?
Well, I didn't document all of what Mr. Helton said, but 4 or 5 things were incorrect. The speed humps were removed, and our policy has changed. The original speed humps were put in the 1990s. County policy has changed since then. I followed the policy. We sent the mail out. We did an extensive study on it. We did 3 not just one. We did 3 different days so that we had a.
So the traffic count was too high?
No, it wasn't
what it
too
is?
high.
No?
It's just that we gave the people the opportunity to vote. And I insisted that we take a rubber stamp and use red ink and say speed hump information enclosed or something to that nature. So that we didn't have a situation where people said, well, I never saw it, or I threw it away because I didn't know it was important. So the process has played out, and now it's up to me to make a decision.
And I know how controversial speed humps are.
Yeah, so.
See, we had an issue on.
All of your comments have been duly noted. I've spent hours on the phone with your fellow residents, and so the decision hasn't been made yet.
We had Pennsylvania, and we had to put new speed humps when we repaved Pennsylvania. And that was sort of a nightmare for our office, because we had 2 or 3 residents that didn't want us to put them back in, and we had the road curing, so they thought that they weren't going to go back in because they initially, the road is level, so I'm all too familiar.
Well,
and then I get a lot of people requesting them on roads that are just
as
too
Mr.
highly.
Lober, Commissioner Lober pointed out, the number is 85%.
Right.
We're not anywhere near 85%.
But in actuality, we have the option to waive that.
Absolutely.
But
That's why I said the decision hasn't been made yet.
But I understand you being the commissioner and why that number was chosen, because you want to make sure that, almost every single person agrees. I get that. But
So
speed
thank you for
humps,
being
I
here.
mean,
May I
should always be.
comment, reply to that?
Do you have a question?
No, I don't have a
No.
question.
Well,
You can't.
He said what I said wasn't true, and I think I should
But
be granted.
if you guys are going to have a discussion, you have to wait till after the meeting. I apologize.
Okay. For the record, there's been a number of requests for a meeting and a return phone call to Commissioner Smith, and it has
Okay.
never been done, never been replied.
All right, thank you. All righty.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the confusion on my part.
That's all
I
right.
just heard the name of the road, and
If you've seen some of the way these districts are drawn, sometimes we have to do Google
they were
Earth.
drawn late at night.
Yeah. Okay, item H1.
Okay, item H1 is the first public hearing for a code revision to Chapter 62, Article 6, Division 1, Section 62-1102, definitions of rules of construction regarding cargo shipping containers. The board approved legislative intent on April 9th, 2019, and directed staff to prepare a code revision to allow shipping containers for use as residential storage buildings with restrictions and conditions, and require building permits as required for any other accessory buildings. Staff was provided with a list of possible restrictions and conditions which were presented to the BCA and LPA. The final LPA recommendations are listed in your agenda.
Okay, I have no cards on it. Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, ma'am. I think we were the ones who kind of brought this forward. We have an overwhelming amount of citizens in our Canaveral Groves area, some in Scottsboro, some in Mims, that are using all these, and so we needed to find a way to be able to allow them. We brought this up at a last meeting, and I was actually a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? I was a little bit more hard-headed about what I wanted to have them and how I wanted them to be arranged, because it was a new idea to me. I think after all of you guys put in a lot of input and actually listened to Commissioner Tabaya on this, he thought it should be more like it's a shed and not so many criteria that we would be putting on it. And I really came to a conclusion, I thought that was a good idea. So some of these I like, but some of them I don't. One, if I may go through this with you guys, I don't want to restrict lot size, because if we did it like a shed, which I went through and studied and I liked it, they don't have a maximum lot size, but it's all within good parameters. It can't be bigger than half of the house, 50%. And I think that's still a good idea to do. So if someone's got a half an acre, I don't know why they couldn't have one of these on it. It's the same as a large shed. So I really like the going with the shed requirements. So on these, I thought, let me see, I wrote this down. I thought, I don't want to do A, if you guys wouldn't mind if we would get rid of that, but please speak to this. B, I think we have to do a building permit. It's just responsible to have the right footers and those things. C might be a good idea, but we can come back to it, because some people are starting to build houses with these and they're getting quite creative, but that might need to be under another category other than us using storage sheds. And F, I think, needs to go. As far as the wording on the container, I think that might be okay, except since these are going into neighborhoods, some people ask that maybe we would request that they paint them so you don't have, some kind of freight name or something on it, but I'll leave that up to y'all's discretion. I think no stacking, I think that has to be no stacking. I think we run into a real situation of the same of two-story buildings. And G, I think, is important, same as a shed, that it's located behind a home. But other than that, I think we got some good framework going. Thank you, Ted, for all your work. You guys have really put in the hours on this. So if you guys are good with that, or if you would speak to it, I'm real comfortable using the same parameters as a shed, but throwing in no stacking. And y'all's opinion on, but I think it might be appropriate that if they've got railroad stuff on it, maybe they paint it so that it looks more like a neighborhood shed or something.
Commissioner Lober?
Couple thoughts. First off, I looked at this realizing that the LPA had already vetted it and made their recommendations. And it's not to say that I always agree with everything that the advisory committees and boards do, but this is one of them where I think all else equal, we should try to give them a little bit of deference, or as much deference as we reasonably can. I really like the idea of having it restricted to 1 acre, but that said, I don't want to be inflexible. So if it's something that's really important to District 1, I would ask maybe to consider 3/4 of an acre as a compromise on that. Really, I don't like reducing it below 1, but I'll do that if 3/4 is acceptable. As far as item G, which deals with the location of the Connex container, it says it shall be located behind the principal building. I agree with that, but I don't know if perhaps there's a way to better specify that. And I know in the ordinance it's worded a little better, but I just want to be sure that at least from a departmental standpoint that there isn't anything we could do to improve on how clearly that's worded. But otherwise, I think it's a good proposal overall. I think it's also going to be important, whatever we do with this, that we authorize staff to deal with any pending or frozen code complaints, to exercise appropriate discretion, keeping in mind what we end up doing, if anything, this evening with respect to this proposed ordinance. So I'm flexible. I just would like to hear where other folks are on it.
Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was trying to take notes. Commissioner Pritchett, you're in favor of, I've got F and G. What did you say on B? Was that a thumbs up or a thumbs down, Madam Chair?
Yeah, ma'am?
Yeah,
I'm trying to
of
learn to go
course.
through the chair.
Oh, no.
Commissioner Tobias, did you say B?
Yes, B as in boy.
I think we need to permit it, just like the sheds are permitted.
Okay. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. This is for Tad. Building permit shall be required. We do or do not require that for sheds right now.
Building permits are required.
Okay. No stacking of containers. Do we allow stacking? Not that anyone would, but do we allow stacking of sheds?
No, sir. Sheds aren't necessarily stacked.
So they're not allowed to be stacked. Is that?
They're not allowed to be stacked, but
Okay,
we don't
that-
necessarily regulate the.
Well, we have height requirements either way, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to keep them as similar as possible. And then containers shall be located behind the principal structure. Do I have to keep my shed behind my principal structure right now?
There are setbacks for sheds in that, and I believe that they have to be in line or behind the principal structure. So what we looked at in creating this was that we mimicked the sheds, but there was a little more emphasis on trying to screen these Connex boxes because of the aesthetics of them and the concerns with the aesthetics.
Well, thank you. I actually think the aesthetics of the Connex boxes in many respects are much nicer than sheds I've seen. But then again, when you and I are judging aesthetics based on our clothing, probably is not the best judge here. The only thing we can say, it's better than Jim. But if we were to go with B, F, and G, is it fair to say we would be treating them no different than sheds?
I believe, yes. They would be considered a shed at that point.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Oops, I turned that off. B, F, and G. I think I'm good with that, too.
I thought that was your suggestion. I'm sorry.
No, it was. I didn't mind C, but you can't live in a shed anyways either, right? You have to use it for storage. I think you're right. They gave me all these suggestions. I was trying to how to throw them in and throw them out. But I agree, I like the shed. And the shed is a maximum of 600 square feet too, which is more lenient than this too. So I like B, F, and G also, sir.
Commissioner Lober?
Let's make a last-ditch effort here to try to salvage what we can out of A, even if it's in less than the restrictive sense as it's worded here. So maybe 3/4 of an acre if folks aren't totally opposed to it.
Go ahead.
The only problem with that is most of my properties that brought this up that are already doing it, some of them are like a half an acre right now, and they have those Connex boxes on them. But what I like about is getting rid of the size is they can't have it on, if it's a shed, it's got to be 50% or less than the house size anyway, so I think it kind of takes care of it.
And for me, I think I was more concerned with, like Commissioner Tobias said, the location of the shed, because some properties, it may not be conducive with what they have existing on their property, so they may not be able to locate it right behind their property. I mean, as much as maybe some neighbors don't want to look at it, if we're going to allow these cargo containers, it probably, at least to me, doesn't matter where it goes in the yard. And I agree on the half acre. Most people have a half, they have one, or they've got 30. It's usually not 3/4, at least when people own property. So I'm okay with half. Is that a new light, Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, it's going to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to move this forward with doing the same criteria as shed requirements in B, F, and G on this item.
Commissioner Tobias?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm going to second that, and I want to thank Commissioner Pritchett. Once again, she's identified and created a solution to an issue not only in her district, but I'm sure this is in other districts as well, that has as little government intrusion as possible. So strongly seconding this.
Thank you, Commissioner Tobias. Do I get a T-shirt now?
Second by Commissioner Tobias. In here, it says it's located behind the principal building, but does that mean it has to be directly behind? Because you're missing the word directly. Because
I think the idea is that it's not in the front yard, and I'm pretty sure
Well,
they
that's
draw
a
a line
pretty
that's
obvious-
parallel to the back of the house, and it can be anywhere in the backyard.
So right, left, corner. Okay, that was my only holdup.
I was going to suggest, depending on how the vote goes, and I think it's going one way, that perhaps we redo what we propose and align it better with sheds for the board, and then some of the locational criteria may come out. And knowing that the board, with the motion, presuming it passes, and then it would just be, we would look at them as sheds, so we can bring that back from that standpoint. It may be a little cleaner. We'll look at it and let you know what after the vote, of course.
So do you want us to vote on this now to move forward with that? Do you want us to modify the motion?
No, ma'am, I think the motion is okay. I just
Okay.
want to, just for a point of clarification, that what comes back is what I'm
Okay.
hearing the board say is they want to look at storage containers the same as sheds.
Great.
So we already have sheds and criteria for sheds in our code, so it may just be modifying the definition of a shed to include the storage container, and we may get there. And that may be the only code revision we need.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 4-1. And did you get who made those motion and seconded? Okay. I'm not sure if I said it. All right. H2?
Good evening, Commissioners. H2 is a petition to vacate part of the public utility and drainage easements along the side lot lines of Lot 45, Block B of the Wingate Estates Phase 2 subdivision. And this will remove an existing residence that's encroaching into that easement. Notices were sent to county agencies and utility companies, and we've received no objection.
All right, I have one card. Hamid? Okay, does the commission have any questions for the applicant? Nope. You're good. All right, commission, what's your pleasure?
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Lober.
Used to live there.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That's cool. Item H3.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is the final public hearing for a 180-day moratorium on any new application of biosolids to lands in Brevard County. Your proposed moratorium was approved by the LPA and has already been through the first board public hearing.
Okay, Commissioner Lober?
Just going to thank staff for putting this together and pushing this through the way that they have and getting all the input that they needed to have. I think this is a good step. Obviously, down the road, when we have the results back from the soil samples, we'll be in a better position to see what really is, from a science-based perspective, necessary and appropriate. I don't know that this is going to be the ultimate outcome down the road, but I think in an abundance of caution, given the amount of resources and the effort that the county and really a lot of local governments have been putting into the lagoon, this is something that unfortunately is necessary and appropriate at this juncture. So I would just say, for the folks that are skeptical, just understand that this is truly going to be revisited once we get those soil samples back and the results. Beyond that, if anyone has any questions, Rocket in my office has been a great resource. She's put together a really pretty incredible memo that's multi-page and fancy. So if anyone wants that, just shoot me an email. And actually, don't shoot me an email. Shoot her an email and have her send that to you.
Great. Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I just, on the what we're doing tonight. Just want to give kudos to Commissioner Lober for bringing this forward. I think it was a good idea. When are we going to start doing the soil sampling, Ms. Barker?
We are trying to put the finishing touches on that. The USDA and the Soil and Water Board and the Water Management District and the IFAS Extension Services staff, they've all been working with us and working with the property owner to come up with a sampling plan that meets the interests of multiple agencies. The Soil and Water Board has voted to help fund the sampling effort as well. So we're taking our time to make sure the sampling plan meets everybody's needs. And so we hope to get out in the field in the October, November timeframe. And then we also plan to try to chase some storm events. So that will be rainfall driven, and we'll have to watch the weather.
Okay, really looking forward to that data. Thank you.
Great, I have one card. Mike Holmes.
Michael Holmes, 3220 Riverville Way, Mel Beach. I just have a question, and it's, I retired as chief of the process departments and the licensed operator for the 4th largest utility in New Jersey. I was responsible for about 2 billion gallons of sewage a month and about several thousand wet tons of sludge. What does the county do? I can't find any information on it. How does the county process its sludge? What's the plan for the future? That's as simple as that. I want to thank you all for your work. It's easier being on this side than yours. I just wanted to find out from somebody, what is the future plan? There are many different ways of getting rid of sludge. I mean, I probably loaded the last 2 barges of sludge to be dumped into the Atlantic. That's how old I am. But what's the plans? I'll sit down, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Lober?
Yeah, Virginia, I don't know if you want to maybe have a conversation with the gentleman or if we should set him up with Eddie, but I know you two both have a lot more precise knowledge than I do. If not, I'm happy to sit down with you and kind of give you a 30,000-foot overview from my understanding.
And I would say that, the simple answer is that all of the county's sludge goes to the lined landfill at this point in time. Yeah.
In Cocoa, just in case you're curious which.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Lober?
Go ahead and move to approve it at this point.
I have a motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item H4.
Item H4 is a request to approve an exchange agreement with Redfish Ranch LLC, who owns the property adjacent to the county-owned Mims launch ramp. They would like to exchange 0.09 acres of their property for ours, and that would provide us with a turnaround area on our boat ramp, and it would grant them ingress to Jones Avenue. So this is a request for the board to approve and authorize the chair to execute the exchange agreement with Redfish Ranch and also execute the resolution that's related to the county deed, and that's in accordance with Florida statutes when you exchange property.
Commissioner Pritchett?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Pritchett, a second by Commissioner Smith. I have a card. Did you need to speak? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We probably should have said that there's no monies involved and that this actually is a benefit to the county, right? I don't want people to think we're just swapping properties and.
Did the Bluefish folks reach out to your office to object? They have the redfish. I didn't know if the Bluefish reached out.
That's hilarious, but not unlikely. All right, item I1. Commissioner Tobias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is the Palm Bay CRA. We sent something over to interlocal agreement suggestion over to Palm Bay. it was not met with the greatest intent. So I was a little perturbed with that, and I think that frustration was felt by our chairwoman, what's happened in Palm Bay going back and forth. It gave me appreciation for our county manager's office that I'm frustrated doing this with one CRA. Our county manager's office has done this with multiple CRAs. In full disclosure, though I don't know I need to disclose this, I've met with multiple members of the Palm Bay City Council asking them what was the most important parts of the CRA. I took an unusual tact here, and that would be a little bit of a compromise. And I think the backdrop is very important, that we have the ability to supplant the CRA board with us for non-performance. And I think there's a great deal of cause for us to do that. However, before we go through that nuclear option, I certainly would like to hand out an olive branch, and this is the olive branch. It's all been emailed, and it's all in the packet, but I want to give you the heads up of the 4 different provisions that I did not have last time. One would provide the CRA to meet all contractual obligations until its original sunset date. Number 2, and this was met by a number of the folks on the CRA, was to provide for the continuance of the North Shore Agreement between the city and the CRA. And I want to make light of this, despite the fact that the contract the parties signed, which would give county the ability to step aside from that. So that is certainly a big compromise. Number 3 would this principle of land banking. The CRA had appropriated about $330,000 that they were interested in purchasing, and in the attempt of redevelopment of that area. That was important, so that is included in here to be very clear. If and when that land is sold, the proceeds would be returned to the city and the county in the percentage in which it was purchased. So I think that's pretty darn fair. Number 4, there were some administrative expenses that were necessary for not only the land banking, but the administration of the North Shore Agreement. I certainly did not want those expenses to fall on the general fund of Palm Bay. So there's a $20,000 administrative expense in this fiscal year. What I was very strict was not, there were some things in the 2020 plan that I had some heartburn with. In their 2020 plan, there were such things as facade grants and beautifying streetscapes and medians, beautifying private properties, creating flashy newsletters and brochures, underwriting private consulting services for businesses. There were lots of things that was not comfortable. So with the 4 things that I put there, but to be clear, and this is just me, and I was extremely clear each and every time I met with either a city council member or the mayor that I was speaking on my behalf. I certainly was not speaking on the behalf of this board. I said that multiple times, but I think you guys spoke loud and clearly when we sent it over there. But this is as truly as far as I'm willing to go. So if this board adopts this, but it's either rejected by the CRA or the city council, the next action I will propose to take is to exercise the authority and take over the CRA. This is not a conclusion I wanted. If that was the conclusion I wanted, I would have proposed it at the last meeting. In addition, I think that we need to exercise option 4. Option 4 is merely an interim measure. This would prevent us from having to take more drastic action as we move forward. So my motion, Madam Chair, is to adopt the proposed ILA, which is distributed by my office, and additionally adopt the resolution delineated as option 4 in the staff report to be instituted indefinitely or such a time as the city and CRA ratify the proposed ILA as written with no amendments, Madam Chair.
I have a motion by Commissioner Tobias, second by Commissioner Lober. Any further discussion? Commissioner Lober?
I just want to point out that, you know, whatever way you were going to go within reason on this, I think you would have had the support of the board. I think the tolerance has certainly run out with respect to the city. I hope that this really does serve to resolve all the issues. If it doesn't, as you said, the other alternatives I think would be less palatable to the city. So hopefully this will do it.
I'll just say, rather than rehash the promises made by the city of Palm Bay as far as what they were going to do with the CRA, what their plans were, and the complete lack of cooperation from some of those. Commissioner Tobias' office came up with this agreement. And it's not because our staff didn't submit something to them. It's because we weren't getting much of a response. So Commissioner Tobias had to go to the council directly to try to get this done. At least that's the rumor. And I mean, I don't think a council member would tell me any different. I just don't think that this is the way we should be doing business. But I understand Commissioner Tobias' frustration because I dealt with it for 6, 8, 10 months while I was told this is what we need to do, this is what you need to ask the board for, back when we were trying to get an interlocal agreement. I don't like this agreement, but I'm going to support it because I know we have to have them support it as well if we want an amicable solution. And the only reason why I'm agreeing to extend this CRA, which is what I dislike most about this agreement, is because I believe that North Shore, this company that's investing millions of dollars in the Bayfront, which is about time because the Bayfront sat dormant for so long, they were made promises and they're probably not even getting everything that they were promised originally. And I don't want to see us, you know, I don't want to see us a party to, you know, something that they should have been entitled to based on what they were told when they agreed to develop there. So I don't like it, but I will vote for it and I'll support it. Thank you for Commissioner Tobias for, maybe this is what our office should have done a long time ago. But, you know, like I said, they told me they wanted to do X, Y, and Z. And, you know, then they said that they didn't. And then they wanted to extend it many years ahead. And then it was, no, we don't. And then the council didn't know what was going on. And I'm glad that you were able to get it done. So, yeah, I'll support it. I'm done. Rant over. And this isn't Commissioner Tobias' district. I think, honestly, I think they just came to me because I used to serve in Palm Bay and was familiar with the history of the CRA, and their business administrator at the time believed the city was moving in a different direction because that's what he was directed to do and directed to tell us. So anyway, I'll stop talking. Mr. Abate?
The only item I would add is, in speaking with the county attorney's office, I do believe that once an agreement is executed, that Palm Bay accepts this agreement, we would have the board revisit the resolution because we would return to the status quo where they would continue because some of those things that they'll need under that agreement would have to be returned. So I believe that would be consistent.
Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, item I2. Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We discussed after we passed our ordinance that we would come back after 6 months. We had a couple things we needed to tweak. And the discussion was to get with the Sheriff's Department. He would gather all the information on what might need to be changed because we were dealing with the penalties and how to redo this. I think from talking to Ms. Bentley, though, the changes that the sheriff thought were appropriate, also we're going to have to re-advertise this. So we're going to have a few discussions about what we're going to do to change. But Commissioner Lober, I know you've been on top of this too. So I know as I bring out a couple suggestions that I brought up with Sheriff, I'm sure you're already aware of some of these too because you've already been researching it yourself. So on the violations, we had wanted them to have documentation far back 48 months. Well, we went through and tried to do some research after that and the Sheriff's Department, and they can only find 24 months. So I asked the sheriff, and he said, yeah, we need to change that because if you can't find the data, you can't impose that on people looking. So I would like to change on page 7, that it goes from 48 months to 24 months. That doesn't put a burden on the pet stores either because they just can't find them. And then the other one is on page 8, and I know this is my fault. I threw out that I want it put on the cage identification number, name of breeder, the USDA license number. And the problem with that, after researching it, is that the USDA redacted all of the breeders' name because they were getting harassed by activists. So I made a recommendation to the sheriff that we just don't put the name of the breeder on there, and the sheriff came back and said, Rita, I don't think we should put anything on the cage. Just put on the cage that information on this puppy can be getting from the owner. Just go ask and request, and then they can get information, so we can kind of get rid of that problem moving forward. And the only other thing is we were looking at the type of penalties, and I did some research on that, and we were putting, let me see if I can find this here. Oh, page 7 also. It has no documented violations, and I think we want to put in there direct violations, because those are the bad ones. And I also found out, well, the indirects are like if a puppy has a broken tooth or something, they're going to point it out. That's called indirect, and they said, hey, you need to fix the dog's tooth. I'm just throwing that out for a fun thing. But I think if we put no direct violations, and I think with the care of the puppies, I think we should also put, or 4 indirect violations. I think that would be fair, because I think more than 4 of them, there's probably a problem also with the indirect. So those are my thoughts on those, on what it would, it's, Commissioner Lober, by the way, you put together a great piece of work here. I was trying to think of a fancier word, but it just lost my mind. But I think this is really, really good. But this has been my research over the last 6 months, and I think it's real solid then.
Commissioner Lober?
Okay, a few thoughts, and I think some of those items are a little more palatable than others. With respect to just kind of a general thought beforehand, I know that we did intend to revisit this roughly 6 months down the road, but my understanding, and I may have been wrong because we had so many different appearances and hearings on this, it did tend to jumble a little. But I had thought we were mostly focusing on how to categorize different levels of offenses. So if, for instance, we had a breeder and they had an exit light sign that had a bulb blown out, we wouldn't say, okay, now you can't sell to Florida because there's something that really doesn't go toward the welfare of animals. I do see that we have some comment cards, and before I have a position or espouse a position with respect to direct versus indirect violations, there are people here that know a heck of a lot more about that than I do, so I would certainly want to hear from them before I take a position for or against that. I just don't know as much about that as Ms. Clifton, for example, who I see in the audience. Another item with respect to the 48 months versus 24 months, if you tell me that you spoke with either the sheriff or with Deputy Hellebrand and they said they could only find 24 months, I'll go with that. I have no reason to disbelieve you. And if they believe that they can enforce 24 as opposed to 48, and that is something that they're comfortable doing, whereas they just can't with 48, that's fine. It's unfortunate. I wish that we could keep it at 48, but if they say they can't enforce it, there's not really much that I could say other than it would look pretty to say 48. So that's probably, unfortunately, what it is. What I will say, though, with respect to the cage card info, and I think, if I remember correctly, and I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but I think you had actually brought that up, Commissioner Pritchett, which I thought was a great idea. What I will tell you is I think that perhaps there has been a lack of, when I say a lack, a total lack of any testimony or any evidence that there actually has been harassment of breeders. I've heard that, but I don't know how much of that is urban legend or really so tertiary or tangential that there's really any way to verify it. I do think that saying that information, and if I gather from what you said, if I gather correctly from what you said, essentially you'd have something saying, well, if you want the info, you're entitled to it, but you just have to go to the shopkeeper, the owner, to get it. My concern with it, and I do trust BCSO to a high degree, but if they show up in green, hi, I'm Deputy so-and-so, I'd like to see XYZ, it's yes, right away, ma'am or sir, here it is, no problem. I have no doubt that would be the case. But I wonder if, other than a face that they recognize, if it's not a deputy, if we take someone at random out of the audience and we have this gentleman from Mr. Smith's district and he goes and says, I want to see it, I just want to make sure there's not any gamesmanship there. And I do believe that BCSO has the ability to send in, I shouldn't say I believe, I know they have the ability to send in plainclothes individuals to check. That doesn't really make me thrilled. If there's genuinely a concern over harassment, I would think at a dead minimum we could have some info on the side of the cage One of the concerns that I think a lot of folks that are familiar with where these animals are oftentimes being sourced is what state are they even coming from? Because if they're not coming from Florida, the chance they're coming from a mill skyrockets. So frankly, I would feel more comfortable if there really is, and I'm not saying there is or isn't at this point, I just want to hear some public comment first, but if there really is that level of harassment and there's a need to have that information behind a counter, and I'm still struggling to see if someone's intent on harassing and they're going to go do something that either is in violation of the law or pushing the limit, I don't see why they wouldn't just go and say, hi, I'd like the info for all these animals, and then go and harass them anyway. But at a minimum, I would really want to see the state of origin on the side of cages, even if we don't have the other or some of the other identifying info, because that to me was a huge win in giving that information to consumers so they could say, look, you know, I have the ability to research this animal. This animal is highly likely to come from a business that has had issues in the past, or the alternative, it's coming from a great source. But I don't know that I'd be flexible to the extent that I would be supportive of having at least at a dead minimum the state of origin on the side of the cages. But you know, with that, I would definitely like to hear the folks that put in public comment cards, their thoughts on it, because I have a few things where I'm fine moving on. There's some things I'm not really fine moving on, and there's some areas where I'm just not sure yet.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, you know, I'm fine if we left on the cage the USDA license number, then you can just go to the USDA and you can research the breeder and the state and everything, and that's really fine with me. That just takes their name out of the equation. You can find out if they've got any violations in the past. The sheriff had just brought up if they were a hobby breeder, which I don't know if they got a lot of them, but I think maybe if it's hobby breeder, like you said, then the state goes on hobby breeder, this is the state the breeder's from, that would be fine also. So I'm absolutely fine with keeping everything on there except just the person's absolute name. Keep their identification number on there, they can look it up. The breed of the animal I still think is a good idea too. So I don't mind keeping that stuff on the cage if you're comfortable with that.
I don't know that would necessarily require re-advertisement if we're removing restrictions as opposed to making them more onerous. I mean, I don't know. Would that?
Yes, because you have an ordinance in place and you're going to change the ordinance.
Okay, so we may want to address the effective date if that's the case, so we're not kicking it out another year. And again, I don't know where I am with respect to direct versus indirect violations till I hear.
I'm fine if you just want to throw the word in no documented direct violation if you want. Those were the ones that would bother us. The indirects are, like you said, a light out or something. So if you want to just put no documented direct violation, I think that would just do the whole thing for you then.
And I just want to, if it's okay, I really would like to hear from the folks that put in cards, because I don't have that level of familiarity with the jargon.
Okay, Teresa, you're up. And after Teresa, Barbara?
Good evening. I'm Teresa Clifton. I'm with the Brevard Humane Society, 1020 Cox Road, Cocoa. I'm very extremely happy that we have this ordinance. I would like it to be a little more stringent myself, but I'm happy to see there is a difference between indirect and direct violations, and I do think that in all fairness that it is something that should be categorized accordingly. As far as information on a cage, for me personally, as long as you can link it back to where they came from, I don't have a problem with it. There are many who believe that it should all be posted. Why are you hiding something? You don't need to hide anything if you're not doing anything wrong. But I understand people's privacy, especially for a private breeder, and the Humane Society in general. We do not have anything against private breeders because most of them are very responsible and they are taking care of the animals that they are breeding. Obviously, the ones that we're running puppy mills are the ones that we are concerned with and the ones that are coming from outside of the state. That doesn't mean all animals that come outside of the state are a bad thing. At the Humane Society, we bring dogs in from Puerto Rico. We're getting them from Bahamas. We got them from South Carolina. We get them from Sumter County. So we understand that, and people want to know where they come from, and we're more than happy to share that.
I'm always suspicious of anyone that wants to hide information or not divulge it, but I do understand the right to privacy for people that are private breeders. So if there is a USDA number that can be traced back to it, I don't have a problem with it. I have been into an establishment that I asked where they came from, and I was escorted out the door. So I personally think that there should be on the book something that gives you a definite, not a maybe, but a definite how you can find out where they come from. Because Brevard County is enjoying the ability to not kill healthy adoptable animals, and not a whole lot of states or counties even can say that. So we work very closely with the Sheriff's Department in that we are now partnering with Pet Supermarket and taking cats from the county when they have too many, and we put them into Pet Supermarket so that they can find homes for them, and it's been very successful. So for me, I don't really think we need the the puppy places anyway, but categorizing levels of violation are also important, because that way it makes people stay in the right lane, if you will. And I would be more than happy to spend time discussing it in more depth and detail than the 13 seconds that I have left.
I'm going to say Brian can ask you.
I'm gonna.
Sorry, Commissioner Lober.
Man, oh, I've been called a lot worse, I promise. A lot worse. With respect to the direct versus indirect violations, I have the utmost confidence that you know a lot more about this than I ever hope to know. Is that reasonable in your mind, having 4 indirect or 1 direct, or is there something that should be tweaked as far as you think? What are your thoughts just in general with respect to that?
Okay, so it depends on the level of the violation, which of course indirect, I mean, you're talking about lighting or space, but direct also has to do with space. So it's it depends on what it is, because you're keeping animals, you're housing them until you find a place to sell them, and to have them in a very small enclosure, have too many of them in the enclosure, it would be a direct. Keeping the room air conditioning, those kinds of things. But to have an emergency light out, it's almost like, well, that would be more indirect than making it a violation. So the care and the welfare of the animal would be a direct violation. The building up to code would be an indirect violation, for example. The animals themselves, and are they cared for? If are they sickly? Is the living conditions kept clean? Are they healthy? A chipped tooth on a puppy. that happens. It's kind of like 2-year-old children. They do chew on things and break their tooth. So it would be indirect. Although if they're in pain, they should be seeing a veterinarian. There should be medical records on them. That type.
So do you think it's, I guess, in terms of just even a raw number, and I know it's probably situation specific, but understanding that we have to kind of cover everything in one fell swoop. Do you think 4 is a reasonable number or unreasonable? Is it high? Is it low? Because I understand you may have a breeder that pumps out puppies left and right, and you may have one that has 20 puppies in a year. But I've just got to try to figure out what's reasonable to put in place as essentially a baseline standard for everyone. As far as saying that a maximum of 4 indirect violations would be permissible, or I guess the 4th would be impermissible, so a maximum of 3 is permissible on the indirect side.
Well, for me, for all intents and purposes, an indirect violation it doesn't directly affect the care or the welfare of the animal.
Okay, I think that answers it for me. That gives me what I need to know.
A direct violation is that it directly affects the care and well-being of the animal. Indirect has no real presence of, if the emergency light's out, okay, well, that's a violation, of the code, but the animal itself is not uncomfortable or in pain or being harmed by it in any way.
Okay. No, I appreciate it. I think that gives me what I need.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, well, you can hear it while you're walking. I agree with you. I think it would be cleaner just to put direct violations. I mean, people probably should mow their lawns and do all those things, but they'll just have to pay the fines on that. But I agree, I think it should be the direct violation.
Because you're indirect, you have laws on the books for emergency lighting.
Yeah. You clarified what I had been reading, so that makes sense to me too. And since you have a level of comfort, I think that's more comfortable too. So that's where I'm going to go. Thank you.
Go ahead.
And just one other thought with respect to that, since we're dealing obviously with one variety of violations, I'd like to add, if we're striking the other, well, regardless of whether we do or not, or any criminal violations, regardless of whether or not adjudication is withheld. So if someone's torturing animals or having sex with them or doing something else that's patently criminal. That's direct. Well, I don't know that that would be categorized as direct, because something like that in all likelihood would be dealt with in state court, as opposed to...
They'll lose their USD license. They won't have a license if they get arrested.
I would just feel more comfortable while that's pending. If they have a criminal, either a withhold of adjudication or an adjudication of guilt, anything but essentially having been no filed or dismissed.
Would it be like a criminal thing on a pet? Because you know
Right,
you've been in this.
animal-related.
Animal-related, it's fine, yes.
Animal-related
Okay.
criminal, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, and regardless of whether or not adjudication is
Because
withheld.
they had just robbed a bank. I mean, they still be.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they may be
I'm
wonderful to their puppy if they
kidding.
robbed a bank, that's okay.
Wouldn't be good.
Thanks.
Okay, Barbara? Oh.
Scott.
Commissioner Tobias, do you want to speak now? Or do you want to wait till the?
On that, I wanted to hear, what was the decision on the adjudication withheld?
Is that more for me or for Commissioner Pritchett?
Whoever brought it up, I was just trying to figure that out. I'm sorry, I was following.
Well, my preference and what I was putting together that you all will see in the next little while, in the next several weeks with respect to that animal abuse registry, if someone does pretrial diversion, I'm not looking at shaming them for life. If the charges are dropped or they're never filed, I'm not looking at holding that against them. But if they get a withhold of adjudication, I want, for purposes of this particular ordinance, to treat it the same as a conviction.
Okay, just out of clarity, we just appointed someone to a board who had adjudication withheld. So I think it's probably, that may go a step further than what I would be comfortable for if we're appointing people who have that on their record or not have that on the record or whatever the heck it is. But either way, when doing a background check of some of the nominees for the Melbourne Tillman, someone had that on their record.
Well, if it's adjudication withheld on loitering, I think it's, perhaps unrelated. I don't know who it was or, what the particular charge was, but if it's a 30-year-old loitering where they had a withhold of adjudication, that's not a concern, nor would it be with this. But if there's something that would suggest that they've done something criminal, namely abusing an animal, neglecting an animal, or having sex with an animal, I would really rather not give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that. When you're looking at withholds, folks don't generally get withholds because they've been doing everything right. They put themselves in a position where there may either be a weakness in the state's case, but the defense is concerned enough that they still want to resolve it, or alternatively, there may be an adjustment oftentimes between the actual sanctions in order to get that withhold. And really, it's important for folks to get the withhold, at least the predominant reason is so that they can check, no, I've never been convicted.
I'm sorry, I'm not an attorney. I just think it's a little weird how we're allowing people who have had adjudication withheld to give us opinions, but not allow them to breed or deal with dogs. I think probably, the advice that we get up on or that they provide us with is far more important than, who is breeding a puppy in my perception.
Well, they're not going to have a withhold on account of breeding a puppy because there's nothing illegal in state statute about breeding puppies. I mean, I can pull up on ledge.state.fl.us and go into the statutes and give you the list of them, but really we're talking about things that would be objectively unacceptable to anyone. If there's a concern that someone has a withhold on some serious charge, whether it's now or in the future, certainly let me know, because that would potentially play a part in terms of determining whether or not I'd vote to put them on a board, because that does matter to me. I mean, depending again on the age and the severity of what they were accused of having done, that certainly plays a part. But like I said, I don't have a problem if someone, when they were a teenager, had possession of paraphernalia 40 years ago. That doesn't have any bearing on whether or not they'd be good on a water district board. But on the other hand, if someone had a withhold of adjudication for having had sex with a puppy a year ago, I don't want them having anything to do with dogs.
Alrighty then. Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, ma'am. I agree with you, Commissioner Lober. I just think that is just disgusting, even thinking about it. But I think as far as this part, I think if you look under the USDA, what they do to even get to become a licensed breeder, I'm not really sure that they'd even get anywhere near close to this. I think just to keep this cleaner, and I do like what you're about to bring also, I think it might be cleaner on this document, because this is what we already had in effect, just no documented direct violations as far as this. But I think what you're about to bring is going to help that other situation tremendously. But I think we're going to end up really complicating this, where I think the USDA already has a lot of criteria before they even license a breeder. It looked very extensive when I was studying their webpage, so.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry for keeping you up there, too. I apologize.
Absolutely fine.
But no, if you're not comfortable with the withhold for purposes of tonight's considerations, I would still ask, in an abundance of caution, given the subject matter of what we're dealing with, that we at least include those folks that have adjudications on animal-related crimes. I just don't see any downside to it.
Well, I just think that's already in the USDA, so I think we're already, if you check that out, I don't think anybody with felonies on animals, they're going to give a license to breed, so I think that's already covered.
They could if there's a misdemeanor, and the other thing is they could change what their requirements are today, tomorrow, and a week.
But you said a felony with that. They're not going to make a misdemeanor on those bad stuff. So I think you're going to find that's probably already covered. And I agree with you. You're very right on having to protect the pets that way, but I think it's probably already in this. When you had the wisdom of putting this together, I think you kind of had it in there. So I think right now on this, to just make it direct, I think we're going to clean that up. And I think the thing that you're about to bring that I'm hearing from staff, I think is going to be very good.
Maybe we should just hear from Barbara
poor
first.
woman, Barbara.
Sorry, I don't want to keep you standing there.
Fine. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Barbara Justice, 502 Cocoa Isles Boulevard, Cocoa Beach. I'm here tonight in support of this ordinance and as much as you can possibly tighten the laws. Given the conversation up on the bench, I am certainly not an attorney, and I could certainly not give you better information than Teresa, but I do know that there are problems in this county that need to be corrected, and I encourage you to please close these loopholes. Please give the sheriff what he needs to be able to stop some of this stuff that's going on. One thing that I would encourage you with the information that I have gotten is to talk to some of the licensed veterinarians in this county and talk to them about the issuance of health certificates and the challenge that they're having and the things that they're seeing in their offices. I think that would be very useful for what you are discussing. And rather than secondhand, I think it would be much better for it to come from them, but I think that it would give your eyes wide open of what they're dealing with in their offices. So thank you so much for considering this. Thank you for caring about the animals and the things that you do. And with that, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lober?
Okay, I'm just, in the time that Barbara was speaking, I was just pulling up some of the statutes, just because there's some things that we may intuitively think, oh, of course that's a felony, and they may not be. So looking at 828.12, cruelty to animals, there are at least some provisions or some portions of that that are first-degree misdemeanors. And then looking at, and this is just in a few seconds of searching, 828.126, which is sex acts involving animals, there are also first-degree misdemeanors depending on the particular portion of that they violate. So there are things that I think are objectively abhorrent that don't rise to the level of felonies, and I think it's important that we really, I mean, we can even say conviction of a criminal statute within Chapter 828 Florida statutes, if you really want to narrow it down. But I would just be a little reticent to say we shouldn't do that at all, because the USDA may not care if it's a misdemeanor. I don't know what their criteria are, and they could change their criteria. So if you don't want to include withholds, that's one thing, but I certainly think if someone's convicted of having been cruel to an animal or having had sex with an animal. And cruelty to animals, when you look at what they actually use for the definition, they're talking about torments and depriving of sustenance, shelter, mutilates, kills, or causes that essentially to be done. So these are things that I don't think anyone would be okay with. And I'm not going to read the section on sex acts involving animals, but they're pretty rough as well. So I don't think that's something that we should say, oh, well, it's a misdemeanor, so therefore it's all right.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Here's my concern. I think we might end up adding to this so much, it's not going to be, we're going to start changing the ordinance a lot. I was just kind of trying to tweak the one we had. If we need to start making a lot of substantial changes, then maybe we need to just, bring this back up and work through some things again. But I thought we had a pretty decent one going forward. I just found a couple things that weren't able to happen from what we had. But I mean, and with that, Commissioner Lober, I haven't had time to really look through all that. Not that I don't believe you, I'm going to have to question people to tell me what that means. But I know you know what you're saying on that. I just don't know how it would fit in this right now because I hadn't have time to process this. I'm a person that processes. So I would be willing right now, again, to just go ahead and do the direct violation because I think that's what you want it to have happen at that time. But throwing in more criteria right now, which I don't think is a bad thing to do necessarily, but Commissioner Tabaya brought up something that got my attention, and again, I don't want to do something that we're not meaning to have happen with this. So I don't know what to tell you on that right now. I probably need more time to do that. I don't know if we'd have the support by the time we did that, but I think these few minor things, it's going to be real easy to do tonight, and you're already comfortable with that. So I'm not adding to it, I'm just tweaking.
Well, I don't disagree that you're not adding to it, but my concern is we're subtracting from it, and I think that the way, and I don't have the exact language front and center in my mind, but the way that it was written before, it was essentially any violation of law that would impact the well-being of an animal. So if we're going to scale that back to a degree, I want to scale that back as little as we possibly can.
Well, but that was our conversation, is the violations, because I said, what if someone left a wet towel? They can't sell the puppy? And you said, no, of course. So the sheriff came out and they said, well, of course, we need to find out what these different levels of violations are. Hence, I spent a lot of time studying these, and I found out there was direct and indirect, and I know the direct ones directly affect the puppy's well-being. The indirect doesn't, so much as they didn't cut the grass properly, or, something's not appropriately put, but it doesn't hurt the dog. So again, I thought, well, maybe if they're really sloppy, maybe we need to look at that. But obviously, the intention of this was harm to the puppies. Therefore, I think the direct violation fits perfectly. So we're not really pulling away from it because I think that was your intent when we did this. The difference was the 48 and 24, you can't enforce the 48 because there's no information out there. Therefore, the sheriff said, I can't even find that. And then you have all the puppy people saying, oh my gosh, well, if they find something that I can't find and they're afraid of being arrested, I thought, ooh, we got a problem. So I thought, let's make it the 24 and everybody's happy and served. And this is late at night.
I think we're close, but the concern is if we have to re-advertise it, I don't want to have to re-advertise it again. What I would ask, I'll just tell you first off what I'm okay with, so that we kind of have all this out there on the table.
Okay.
Based on what you told me with your conversations with BCSO, we can scale it back to 24. I'm fine with that. If that's all that they can determine, that's all they can determine, so that's fine. As far as no documented direct violations on a federal level, that's fine. But I would just say on a state level, and oftentimes the feds won't prosecute if the state's going after someone and vice versa. So I think it's important that we not have a huge glaring loophole, in particular Chapter 828 of Florida statutes. If you don't want to include withholds, that's fine. I'd prefer to include them, but I think if someone's having sex with animals or causing other folks to do that or somehow arranging that, that's not okay. If someone's intentionally tormenting animals to the point that they're convicted of that.
Well, it's not, but shouldn't they be in jail if they do that?
Well, they may be in jail, but they may still be able to operate the business.
Okay, and then, well, I got to tell you too, I'm an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, so when you say a couple of these things, I'm thinking I have no idea what that is.
Yeah,
So,
the other thing is, I
so
mean,
I have to,
if it's a misdemeanor, there's, even for felony, there's nothing that says for something especially of this nature that you'd have to do one day in custody.
I know, but some of those things you mentioned, and I'm not going to say I'm Commissioner Lober, but I can't imagine them not going to jail for that.
There's some bad folks, and I can tell you they wouldn't want me on the jury for something like
Well,
that. I guarantee
you
they're
gotta
not going to
remember
pick me.
I don't mean to interrupt, but the state of Florida views animals as property. I mean, they don't view them like, that's why you can do really awful things with animals because they have no value according to the state, which is really sad.
Well, I'll tell you what you can do. We'll work on, we can do that as we're advertising this, correct? Because we have to re-advertise it. Can you come up with something in language that'll fit in there that give me time to figure it out?
Yes.
Yeah, if you want,
Okay.
why don't we just cover everything and then we can address it when we come back? But,
Okay,
you know,
so if you want to put in there that nobody could have been doing that really bad stuff to the dogs, I'm fine with that. So
Okay.
we're just going to have to figure out how to put that in. But I do have a concern with Commissioner Tobias said too, so we can't leave it very general. So we have to figure out.
Like actually convicted as opposed
I mean, if you
to
want to say
adjudication.
adjudicate, you know, have been adjudicated guilty, that's fine. I prefer the withholds as well. Again, we're not saying withhold for anything under the sun. It's not that they were, you know, prowling or they trespassed somewhere where it has nothing to do with an animal. I mean, we're talking about.
I just can't even imagine people doing stuff like that. I'm sorry, but you've lived through stuff.
Yeah, I hate to say it, there's a reason the laws are on the books, and even if some are less frequently used than others, it doesn't mean there's not a reason for them. And, you know, hopefully they really don't have much use. That's my hope. But then if there aren't any folks or aren't too many folks that fall under these categories, this really isn't restricting anyone at that point.
Okay, so if you want to figure out something in there to do, and then we can all take a quick peek at it and let it
Sure.
fit in. Okay.
And then I'm good with what you said as far as redacting the name off the cage cards. If you're okay with leaving everything else, I'd
Yeah,
prefer to leave everything else. It makes me a lot happier.
I'm totally good with that.
And then I think that was pretty much it, right?
Yes, sir, that's the whole thing. And then I thought everything else was ready to go.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, I would say, you know, I can have a conversation with you, but there are several decent attorneys that practice animal law. I can give you their contact info if you'd like. I can certainly make it available, but I'm
Go ahead, Eden.
outside of the meeting. It's tough for me to have a conversation.
Did you want to address the 48 to 24
It's
months?
24,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
good
already
with
said
20.
That's, yeah,
Well,
scaling that to 24 is fine.
I guess we need to make sure the rest of the commission's good too, you and I
Well,
have been.
You can make a motion, I'll second it, and then we'll go from there.
It's
Okay.
fine.
Okay, I would like to make a motion then to move forward with re-advertising this, Ms. Bentley, and that you would bring us back a draft with some of these changes in it, and maybe some language here for us to consider.
Do you want me to come back for legislative authorization to advertise first, or just come directly to you?
We can just come forward with this,
Okay.
can't we?
However you wanna
I think
do.
they're minor, but Ms.
You've already
Bentley said we must
advertised, we're
advertise.
discussing
Yeah, however you wanna do it.
Yeah, I'm good, just bring
And
it
then what
back.
about effective date? How can we try to keep it tied into the date that it was set to go effective? Can we keep that same date, whatever that might be?
This ordinance is in effect. We'd only be modifying it slightly, so it will
Okay.
have the same effective date for the
That's good.
majority of the terms.
That's good. Okay.
All right, I'll second it.
I have a motion by Commissioner Pritchett, second by Commissioner Lober. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that my opinions and feelings haven't changed a bit since the last time this was brought up. This doesn't have anything to do with puppy mills. We're not going to stop one puppy mill. We're not going to close down one puppy mill. We're not going to protect one dog in a puppy mill. So I'm going to vote no, just so you know.
I'm not getting you a shirt.
Well, maybe I'll change my mind.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2 with Commissioner Tobias and Smith in the negative. All right. All right. We went over J1 already. Item J2.
Commissioner, we've submitted as part of this agenda report a recommended letter for the chair to sign if the board approves it, to send to the congressional delegation, thanking them for their efforts on South Patrick Shores.
Commissioner Lober?
I've moved to approve it, but I just wanted to add as well, you know, I support this, but I want to thank the folks that live in that area. I don't want to specify individuals by name because we had so many folks that came up to discuss this over a period of time. If I start naming, I'm going to forget someone.
Sandra Sullivan?
Yeah, Karen Colby, we had a slew of folks. We had
Yeah.
folks that had some health issues, potentially as a result of some of the concerns that they've expressed. And I think everyone really has done their part in the county. The residents have, the congressional delegation has. I think this board really has gone above and beyond to try to make staff available to provide any info that we have or can easily obtain. So, you know, I certainly support it and hope that other folks will as well.
Second.
All right, motion by Commissioner Lober, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And I'm really glad these people got resolution. I really am, because I think, and I don't know who did what. I just know Congressman Posey's office is amazing. Anytime I've ever had to send someone there because it was out of my area, his office has been awesomely responsible, and kudos to them for helping Sandra and the other people affected by this. I mean,
I was there yesterday. They were always great.
it's awesome. I'm so impressed, and I'm impressed with Sandy. Sandy is very passionate when she comes here, but she's right, and I'm glad the congressman listened. So I'm excited. All right. I think that's it, guys. Because I don't have any public comment cards. No. Board reports, Mr. Vate,
No report.
Ms. Bentley,
No report.
Ms. Pritchett,
No report.
Mr. Lober,
No report.
Mr. Tabaya,
No report.
Mr. Smith.
I would just like to thank everyone for their support for Real Men Wear Pink. It's a great campaign. It's a worthy cause, and I'm glad to see so many people in our staff and our public have gotten behind it and supported it.
Awesome. And I want to say, we have this project going on, this FDOT project going on A1A. And I don't know if a lot of people watch our meetings, but I figure if I reach 2 and this gets to them, obviously we have some issues with cones and traffic, and we've gotten a couple of calls. It's kind of blowing up a little bit on social media in a couple places, but after talking with DOT and TPO Director Georgia Gillette, we got them to scale down this project that was supposed to take a year. They've scaled it down to 136 days, which is like 4 months. So they're out there. I guess today we're looking at those cones to figure out how to make it a little less painful. But they're going to try to do the best they can by residents, because I know it's very frustrating. But they're improving. They're doing a minor drainage project. They're doing some asphalt. They're putting in sidewalks. They're doing the crosswalks. So, I mean, it's got to get done, and it's unfortunate that everybody's put out a little bit, but at least they were able to get the contractor to complete the project in a third of the time. So we're really excited about that in District 5, so I have that. And also, too, and I'm kind of springing this on staff, but maybe Mr. Denninghoff, if it's okay, Mr. Bate, I asked Mr. Denninghoff, I want to find out where we are with the City of Palm Bay with our Babcock agreement. I don't know how much background we want to get into, but basically Commissioner Anderson, just to tell the commission, when he was here, he got the commission to agree to commit $1.5 million to an intersection for the Parkway on Babcock. Well, the county at the time was trying to get an interlocal agreement with the City of Palm Bay for, I think this is year 4 now, correct?
It might be year 5.
Right, okay. Well, I wasn't here, but this is $1.5 million that we obviously have other road projects. We obviously have other things we want to do, but we understand how important that intersection is. But again, it's this lack of cooperation. I've told council members, I know our staff has tried, and I don't know what we do at this point, but I don't want that money sitting there anymore. So if by October 22nd, we don't have something that you can bring to this board, as far as an interlocal agreement with the City of Palm Bay, I want to reallocate those funds to another needed area in Palm Bay, since those monies were supposed to go there. I'm happy to, again, you and I discussed this 18 months ago, about where else we could use that money, and there's other areas on Babcock that are in dire need, so that's a possibility. But I don't want to play games with a developer. I don't want to play games with a city that doesn't want to come to the table and get this interlocal done. And they already know how frustrated I am, but I figure it's better that I bring it up here than at their city council meeting, because that's the classier thing to do, if that makes sense. But that money's not going to sit there, because frankly, I've seen it on this board. I am darn lucky that 3 votes of a commission didn't swipe that money out of my district for just sitting there in the bank doing nothing, when we could have been paving road. So now the county staff knows how frustrated I am, but I wanted to get it on the record. I didn't want anybody to say they didn't know about it. Not staff, but, the City of Palm Bay and the commission. But that money's, I don't want that money sitting there anymore. Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, Commissioner Isnardi, whatever you want to do is go with me. I've learned from being up here long enough and watching them before. When we made those decisions, they were equitable through all the districts. So that's what your commissioner did with other districts, having things that they need to get done. So I'm in total agreement with that. I love having the equitable passing out through all 5 districts of county funds. So yes, ma'am, whatever you choose that you need to do as a project, I'm on board.
4 or 5 years that money's been sitting there.
That's a long time. I hope you get interest
4 or
on it
5
for yours,
years.
too.
Yeah. Commissioner Lober?
I wasn't going to mention it, but since you brought up an infrastructure item, if I can have a little leeway.
Sure.
So the Sykes Creek Bridge in my district, we did finally get our FEMA determination not too long ago, and they shot it down. I've spoken with Mr. Denningoff and Mr. Abate and other staff with respect to whether we agree with their determinations or not. We don't. We're going to appeal it. But that said, I think that our record with respect to appeals is out of the last 3, we've, I think, been at least partially successful in only 1. And the employee who handled that at the time is no longer with the county. So I'm not terribly optimistic that that's going to turn out the right way. That said, it's still something that needs to be addressed. It's going to be somewhere between probably $2 and $4 million. The marina's back there. It's suffering tremendously. I think we're going to be in a position where the longer this goes, the worse the impact is on the county as a whole. I've spoken with some of the folks over at the port, and I'm trying to hopefully get a little bit of help from them in terms of financing this. I've spoken with staff over at Myra to see if we can do something. There's some restrictions in terms of the enabling legislation where we may have to get creative with respect to how they can help us. It is in their strategic area, so it's something that is possible. I've met with Linda Weatherman over at EDC to see if there might be some grants that she's familiar to any degree with that we can make use of either at the state or more likely at the federal level. So I'm going to see what we can do to offset the county's costs, but the fact is we're going to have a 7-digit expense that we're going to have to take care of. It's totally shut the vehicular traffic as it's been for some time, but that's coming up.
Awesome. So just, to go back to my item, is the commission okay if the county brings back options for that $1.5 million?
Yes. Yep.
And I mean, again, I would like, and you guys know this already, but just for the record, I would like to still use that money within the city of Palm Bay because I think that's the fair thing to do. I still want to be able to improve something that is been overdue to be improved. And I know we talked about possibly expanding the existing Babcock project that we started that's closer to Malabar Road. It may even be in Commissioner Tobias' district, but again, I think I'll reiterate it again. I don't really care whose district it's in, as long as it's in Palm Bay, because I think that that's probably the right thing to do, if that makes sense. So if you could just bring us back some options for that, notify the city of Palm Bay.
I can do that.
Because they obviously don't think that we're serious, but.
I can go ahead and give you an update if you'd like. We have a draft version of an interlocal agreement that would achieve a number of, I think, good goals that would allow them to access the $1.5 million, based on those other goals being combined as part of the interlocal. I expect to have a meeting, in fact, I had a meeting today with the internal staff to go over the sort of try to finalize the draft version of this. I intend to provide that to the city staff, the assistant city manager, and try to schedule a meeting, I believe, on Friday a week from now. I believe the 19th. That's what we're shooting for. I don't know if we're going to make that or not, but I'm hoping to more or less get it to the point where they can take something to their council. They understand, and I've made it abundantly clear to them that I don't speak for the county commission, and that the county commission may not find it desirable to agree to that interlocal agreement. And at which point the money would certainly be allocated to something, and it may get allocated to something else anyway. So I've made that very clear to them. So I certainly can bring back some options on the 22nd, but I probably won't be able to have their final position on the interlocal agreement by the 22nd. Because
See,
there's-
and I give you guys all the credit in the world, because you guys know how angry I am about this, and but it's just been going on for so long. And I didn't want to bring it here, but I know you understand my frustration, because I don't think it's on our part. I think they just kept putting us off because the money was already committed. They know we need to have a good intersection there, and they know we won't commit to something that's substandard, which is what they were trying to throw at us before.
There
And
was
I'm
some
not
effort that
blaming
way.
anybody specifically, but what I'm saying is, it's their impact that's affecting that intersection. And we're building a $4.5 million intersection with a developer in the city. City doesn't have the money for the intersection, because if they do, that's news to me. I mean, that's what a council member told me, is that they didn't have the funding for it. So what, is it going to be a $3 million intersection? Because they're not going to be able to chip in. I don't like games. I don't like that money sitting there for even a day longer. That's why I told you guys 6 months ago, 30 days, and then we said 60 days, and then we said, and I know you're doing your part, and I know and it's not you guys. I'm done with it. So I'd like to see some options by the 22nd, because if they care enough, if the management or the administration or whoever you're dealing with over there cares enough about getting that intersection and getting that interlocal agreement done, they'll get it done and get it to us, or at least get us in a good place.
I can tell you they've gotten much further along in the last, I'm going to say, 30 to 45 days.
But that could change, because look what happened with the BCRA.
I understand. I am very
They went
cognizant
from
of that.
one plan and did a 180 and decided to do something else.
And we've seen that through this process as well.
Yeah, so I'm over it. So I'd like to see some options by the 22nd, if the commission's okay with it. All right, cool. All right, that's all I have. All right, with that, call meeting adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.